"I'm almost there!" exclaimed Tae-Kyung. The story begins when a man is seen carrying a large, unidentified object on his back. He delivered the object to a middle-aged man named Gino. When he saw the item Tae-Kyung delivered, he said that it was trash. Gino says to Tae-Kyung, "There is no need for anyone to dig through a pile of trash to see if it's actually trash or not." But Tae-Kyung needed the money. This made Tae-Kyung pissed, but Gino made a point to calm him down. He says, "Let's calm down and think about the law of the awakened beings." More specifically, Article 1, Line 12. It states that you should never use violence against normal civilians. After exchanging words, Tae-Kyung calmed down because he had no choice. Gino was relieved since Tae-Kyung would be fired if he assaulted a civilian. Tae-Kyung cuts him off. He says, "I'm already fired." Tae-Kyung further says, "I am a ranked F hunter. I became a hunter because of my late father, who was also a hunter. Despite lacking talent in hunting, I am proud of my hard work and sheer effort to be able to pay for my mother's medical bills and also support my younger sister." After that guilt-tripping session, he manipulated Gino into buying a drink, and they went out. A flashback from what happened on January 1st, 2015, can now be seen in the next scene. It was not the same New Year's celebration that humanity was expecting. A portal connecting one world to another was opened. This portal, known as the Dungeons, was opened in different parts of the world. Containing monsters they had never seen before, they started pouring out from these gates. A battle was fought between the monsters and the awakened beings. After years of battles, they finally end the Great War by killing the Demon King, Asmodeus. That day happened on January 1st, 2020, and it was called Victory Day. It created a new era by creating the Hunters, who are killing monsters for loot and selling it at auction. After Tae-Kyung and Gino had their all-out drink, Gino passed out, so Tae-Kyung tried to wake him by slapping his cheeks. Tae-Kyung thought of the idea that he might sell the item in exchange for the price of a snack. He got curious about the item, so he pushed the button, and it revealed a user manual inside. It was made on the day that the Great War ended, but he got tired of checking the item, ignored it, and slept. Due to Gino's loud snorts and farts, he couldn't sleep peacefully. He then thought of sleeping in the capsule. He went inside it, and as he tried to think about his future, he felt sleepy. But he didn't know the capsule lit up, indicating it was on. As he was sleeping, the capsule had already registered his name. Tae-Kyung woke up in shock when he saw a woman sleeping beside him. He asked the woman, "Where am I?" But the woman spoke in a different language. But what shocked him the most was the interface in front of him. Tae-Kyung was dropped out of bed without his clothes on. It has a message in front of him saying, "The translation package has been installed." He grabbed his hand in the air and said, Wait a second." Wola asked him, "Master Jin, are you okay?" His face just went into a very confused mode, asking himself, what the hell is going on right now? So basically, based on his understanding of the situation, he's inside the game, and he's playing that game right now. He cannot figure out how he logged into the game, and he cannot even remember turning the game on. Wola gave him a bowl of soup, saying, "Please drink this. It seems you still haven't sobered up." The game is way too realistic, and he heard that technology these days has vastly improved, but he never expected it to be this good. He says to himself, "So this is why people play VR games. I can see why people get addicted to this kind of stuff." Wola tried to get his attention. Tae-Kyung asks, "What's wrong?" Wola says, "I guess I'm just confused, Master Jin. You're acting quite strangely today." He asks her, "What's strange about me?" Wola says, "I don't know everything. It's like you either went mad or lost your mind. You're even talking formally to me. So I'm not entirely sure what's going on with you right now." As she was talking, another interface opened before Jin Tae-Kyung's face. It has a message saying, "The tutorial quest has begun." It was a quest tutorial with quest rewards, and a message popped up again. It says, "You are finally taking your first step in the world of Murim. Gather information and become familiar with your current surroundings." Then his information popped up again, containing his rank, restrictions, and objective. It also has its own quest rewards, containing a sturdy traditional robe set, access to a character profile, inventory, skills, and quest progression. But before he accepted the quest, he asked Wola how she knew about him. Wola just laughed and said Master Jin Tae-Kyung is just like what the rumors said. Tae-Kyung made a creepy face at Wola. Tae-Kyung says, I'm just asking because I'm curious if they're the same as the rumors I've heard before. But Wola gave in and told him about the rumors about him. After talking with her, he was able to gain quite a bit of information. He first found out where he was. He's in the capital of the Shanxi province, which is known as Taiyuan. The brothel that he was staying at is located in the inner city of Taiyuan and is called the Crimson Flower. Wola is a high-ranking hostess working at this brothel. And lastly, he is Jin Tae-Kyung, 20 years old. The youngest son of the Jin family residing in Taiyuan. The Jin family of Taiyuan is a prestigious family that represents Shanxi province. They were known for fending off bandits and giving food and supplies to the people during famines or droughts. Due to these reasons, the Jin family was respected and liked by the people of the city. Suddenly, the interface popped again in front of him. It says, You were able to find information pertaining to the Jin family. You have earned the title Son of a Noble. You will be able to check your title in the character profile. Wola says, But I've heard that your family is facing some internal issues. Wola continued by saying that the external issues are that the Mount Heng sword sect is trying to find an opening to take over the leadership position in Shanxi province. And apparently the internal issue is that the third son of the Jin family is a troublemaker. At first, he thought that there was always a bastard like that wherever you went. After some time, he finally realized something. He asked Wola, How many sons does the Jin family have? And Wola responded, 3. And that's where Tae-Kyung realized that the troublesome child Wola was talking about was him. Then a message popped up in front of him again, saying that he earned the title, The Shame of the Family. And suddenly, he had completed the Gather Information objective. After making such an idiotic face, Wola says, Master Jin, forgive me for saying such things, but you're acting like a crazed idiot again. She then asked him to take a break. After a conversation, Jin Tae-Kyung tried to return to his real world and find a real job. Before leaving the game, Tae-Kyung took one last glance at Wola, thinking to himself that even though it was brief, he still had fun. He pointed his finger in the air and shouted the word, Log out! But, after several attempts to shout the word, he was informed by the interface that he couldn't log out. He was confused about whether he had done something that he wasn't supposed to do. If it's an error in the system or maybe some lagging or some issues with the capsule, it's old. He realized that he should have thrown it away after Gino said that it was trash. Then he remembered the manual he was reading before falling asleep in the capsule. Once he enters, he cannot leave the game. If he dies inside the game, he will also die in real life. That's when he knew that he had messed up. He suddenly heard a ding and opened a message saying, You have completed the familiarization with the surrounding objective. Then a quest opened, saying that he had completed tutorial part 1. He also received quest rewards containing access to his character profile, inventory, and skills, and he is now able to progress to the next part of the chain quest, which is the tutorial, part 2. His face cannot hide his disappointment and confusion, realizing that he's screwed. Jin Tae-Kyung is now returning to his home. After 3 days of different ways to log out, it was all the same, and the results were all the same. But looking on the bright side, he saw a loophole in the manual, which made him think positively. He plans to do many quests to level up and be able to leave the game. He opened his quests to check up on his profile, but he was disappointed with what he saw because he was only a 3rd-rank warrior. He saw his character, and there he saw that his strength, agility, charm, stamina, intelligence, and QI were all only 10 points. But it wasn't a surprise because of what Wola told him, since he is the infamous troublemaker and 3rd son of the Jin family. Since he has 100 points left, he wanted to distribute them. He put 30 points on both strength and stamina, and 40 on agility. The moment that he accepted the changes in his stats, he felt an awakening after changing his strength, stamina, and agility the same way he awakened 7 years ago. Then after that, he opened his skills, and he was more disappointed since his physical and internal states were only 10. Since he has a total of 100 points available, he put 60 in physical states and 40 in internal states. The internal state focuses more on his veins and tendons, while the physical state focuses mainly on the structure of his bones and muscles. And just like he did a while ago, he accepted the changes and felt his body change. He felt something on his hands and his shoulder blades, and his whole body muscles increased the moment he confirmed it. His body is nowhere near what it was before. He developed muscles, and his body figure increased too. He felt an immense surge of strength. But Tae-Kyung is not done. He opened his inventory, and he saw a robe, which he later equipped. By doing this, he received a reward, and it was a spear. He equipped the item. Later, the interface popped again before him, and he was told that his third tutorial was to eliminate the bandits. Jang Sam is one of the bandits. He is known as a man who never left the surroundings of the 5 Great Mountains. He became the leader of a ragtag group at the age of 20. They are a group of thugs forcing travelers to pay a passage toll. He worked day and night and was considered a Jansam with thousands of strengths. But for some reason, he left the 5 Great Mountains when he saw Jin Tae-Kyung's carriage. The driver of the carriage went to let Jin know about their situation. But Jin saw his manic smile towards the bandits, and that's when he realized that Wola had given him a driver with martial arts skills. The driver asked for Jin's permission to fight against them. The driver went in the direction of the bandits and faced Jang Sam. He exchanged foul words with Jang Sam, but Jang Sam wanted to see the face of Jin, who was in the carriage. Jin Tae-Kyung thought that his carriage driver was a martial arts warrior, but he was shocked when the diver returned in his direction. He asked Jin to teach them a lesson since he obtained the nickname Heavenly Jin Blade when he was 20. The driver misunderstood something and thought that he was escorting Jin Mook-young, who is Tae-Kyung's second older brother. This made the driver furious, and he fainted when he learned that he was escorting Tae-Kyung, not the second brother. Jang Sam laughed at him. He gave Tae-Kyung a chance to live if he obeyed them. Meanwhile, the other bandit tried to throw his axe at Tae-Kyung, but it failed. Tae-Kyung realized that besides Jang Sam, the bandits looked weaker than the goblins he'd fought. Tae-Kyung walked towards Jang Sam, and he felt the chi in his stomach. He jumped to buy some time to equip his spear, and then he stabbed Jang Samasing with his spear. An interface popped again in front of him, confirming the death of Jang Sam. Because of this, he gathered points and even unlocked the Jin family's cultivation technique. After winning his fight against Jang Sam, Tae-Kyung successfully completed the 3rd tutorial and will now do the 4th one. When the driver woke up, he was surprised by what he saw: a dead Yang Sam and the other bandits full of bruises. The driver still cannot believe that Tae-Kyung fought with the bandits. Meanwhile, while Tae-Kyung is on his way back to the Jin family, he has a flashback about what Gino said about the time difference in the VR world. Gino mentioned that the time in VR games doesn't make the time slower, but just makes it feel like it. It is determined by how much data can be stored in the brain. It will feel like time is going slower if it stores more data. Tae-Kyung had already spent 3 days inside the game, and by this time, Gino should have woken up. He kept thinking about the capsule but gave up since he didn't know. He opened his skills and saw the Jin family's spear technique, their footwork technique, and their family's cultivation technique. Then the quest regarding the 4th tutorial appeared. His quest is to control his QI properly. If he fails, the consequences are QI deviation or death. He trusts Gino to save him, so he declines the quest. Unfortunately, he cannot decline a tutorial quest. He has no choice. Even if he wants to decline the quest, the game automatically accepts it for him, as if he is being ignored. Then his vision started to warp, and he only knew that when he opened his eyes, he saw nothing but light. A voice was heard, and it was from an old man sitting down. He offered Tae-Kyung to sit comfortably, but Tae-Kyung hesitated since he had to sit in a lotus position to control his QI properly. But the old man in front of him told him that the martial masters didn't mind whatever he was doing. Tae-Kyung was shocked because the martial master could hear his thoughts. Suddenly, the martial master walks towards him, and the next thing he knows, he cannot move his body. After setting Tae-Kyung's body ready for cultivation, the martial master recites the Jin family's verses about cultivation technique. He felt his whole body being burned up. He was then again informed by the game that the cultivation had already started. After he followed the meridian, he now completed the QI circulation control. He's now done with all of the tutorials, and he learned a new skill called QI sense, which can help him determine the position and strength of other people's ki. Now he's unlocked the main quest. After he returned to reality, he sensed a different type of energy accumulating inside his body. In the middle of thinking about it, he was interrupted by the driver. It looks like Jin Tae-Kyung has already arrived at his house. Tae-Kyung circulates his chi inside his body, but he was actually thinking about it and remarking on how magnificent the chi's presence was. On the route to the Jin's estate in Taiwan, Jin Tae-Kyung asks his driver to slow down the carriage because he has an idea to test his ki sense that promptly proves to be helpful to him as he puts it to the test and succeeds. Jin Tae-Kyung was thrilled to learn afterwards that he can now depart from the treacherous world of Murim, and in order to successfully log out of the game going forward, he needs to be properly armed, use his combat experience, and utilize the game system. Jin Tae-Kyung was deeply relieved that the game was coming to an end, but he also felt a sense of vengeance for the game's developer. As they approached the Jin family estate, Hyuk Moo-jin, the commander of the gatekeepers, stopped Jin Tae-Kyung's carriage. However, Jin Tae-Kyung simply expresses his regards to the guards as they go about doing their job. But to his surprise, Hyuk Moo-jin asks him to step out of his carriage and follows the standard process for entering the estate. The situation didn't sit well with Jin Tae-Kyung, and he felt like he was being interrogated and treated like a criminal in their own place. Hyuk Moo-jin was simultaneously interrogating Jin Tae-Kyung and inadvertently giving him unsolicited advice, while also indulging in some bullying for being the embarrassment of his family. Even though Jin Tae-Kyung is fully aware that everything is only a game, he was enraged by what the gatekeeper was doing to him. This made him feel furious, even though he knew it was all just a game. Therefore, as a gift in return, Jin Tae-Kyung punched the gatekeeper, which led to a fight. Now, after the fight, the father of Hyuk Moo-jin, the gatekeeper, revealed everything to Wik-young, Jin Tae-Kyung's older brother and family head, as well as Wee-pung, Wik-young's assistant. Jin Tae-Kyung was sent to the infirmary because, according to reports, things did not end well for him, and he was in a bad state. The father was on his hands and knees, pleading for pardon for what had transpired. Now back to the past. Since the mansion guard had a little argument with Jin Tae-Kyung by insulting him in his face, they got into a fight. Jin Tae-Kyung is now attacking him, and the guard made little to no effort to avoid his punches. Due to the guard's offensive statement, Tae-Kyung is now pissed off. Tae-Kyung's real-life form and consciousness are also there, watching himself fight the huge guard. They exchange punches when Tae-Kyung sees an opportunity to hit the guard by smashing his head into the guard's chin. At first, he was curious about the guard's level. It was 20. It's a lot higher than his level. Moo-jin is already pissed off, resulting in his defeat. The next day, Jin Tae-Kyung woke up and saw an old worker. He explained that Tae-Kyung was at the medicine hall and had been out for an hour. He told Tae-Kyung not to do anything but rest. After the worker went out, Tae-Kyung opened up his character profile. He is now a second-rate warrior with 50 points in agility, 40 points in strength and stamina, and 10 points in charm, intelligence, and QE. He has 10 points to distribute for one of his skills. He decided to put the points into his stamina. As he reflected and remembered his moves, he heard a voice coming from outside his room. It showed him his older brother, Jin Wik-young. He is serious and hates seeing his youngest brother in that position. He wanted to know his level but could not see it for an unknown reason. Based on what he is seeing, the attitude of the man in front of him makes him think he is his father. Then the worker left them alone, while Tae-Kyung begged the worker not to leave him because of the grim appearance of the man he claimed was his father. The man scolded Tae-Kyung, but it seemed he was doing it to let the worker know that the youngest Jin was being punished. But in reality, the man is gentle to Tae-Kyung. The big man smiled at him and was glad that he only had a minor injury. Due to the confusion, Jin Tae-Kyung asked the big man who he was. Jin Wik-young was shocked and asked to call the doctor again since his injury must have been on his head. After a while, Jin Tae-Kyung finally remembered his name. The man beside him is not actually his father, but his oldest brother, Jin Tae-Kyung, and the Jin family's current head. Tae-Kyung is currently 35, has no relationships, and is not married. Tae-Kyung then asked his sibling about their parents, and their brother, Tae-Kyung. After some days, Jin Tae-Kyung is already healed and can leave the medicine hall. Another worker accompanied him to his own house. He was so amazed at how big it was. When Jin Tae-Kyung arrived at his house, he was overwhelmed by its size. He took his time to familiarize himself with his new home. As he finished looking at the house, he realized the old Jin Tae-Kyung was a fashion addict. Almost all of his rooms inside the house are full of clothes. He is now in the last room. He hoped the room was not like the other rooms he had discovered. When he opened the door, he knew the room was what he'd been looking for. It's a room full of books, which we call the library. He grabbed a book containing the 3-foot techniques of war. As he saw it, the 3-foot technique is the most basic foot technique for realistic warfare. Then another interface from the game popped up and asked him if he wanted to learn the selected martial arts. On the other hand, the eldest son of the Jin family, Jin Tae-Kyung, is seen together with his assistant. The assistant gave him a cloak to prevent him from getting chilly since it was already night. When they are on their way back, he notices the room of his brother, Tae-Kyung. Even though his assistant insisted on not letting him visit his brother after Tae-Kyung faked his amnesia. Tae-Kyung took a peek inside the room. He was shocked to see his youngest brother working his ass off to practice martial arts. Meanwhile, Tae-Kyung has already learned the Jin family's foot technique. He sat on the floor, panting and catching his breath while his body was sweating. He took a drink from the bamboo bottle. After learning the footwork, Jin Tae-Kyung ended the day by getting the books about martial arts out of the room, and also the erotica novel that he found a while ago. I hope you guys know what illustration would be present inside this book. In the comfort of his own room, Jin Tae-Kyung struggled to fall asleep, so he chose to meditate instead. The servant briefly disturbed Jin Tae-Kyung during his meditation, and was taken aback to see him awake. The servant and Jin Tae-Kyung were conversing, and Jin Tae-Kyung was delighted to notice that since he had correctly circulated his chi, he had clearly seen a difference in the clarity of his thinking, the ease with which he could stay alert, and the discomfort he feels is gone instantaneously. The servant, however, refuted this claim and informed him that it was conceivable for his injuries to worsen, so he advised Jin Tae-Kyung to get plenty of rest. Tae-Kyung, meanwhile, was in a buoyant state and overwhelmed with happiness when he learned that Jin Tae-Kyung, his youngest brother, was interested in martial arts. He made the decision to forego work and support his brother instead. However, Wee Peng, his assistant, did not share Tae-Kyung's sentiments and advised him to concentrate on his work because he had many obligations, particularly given the current problems they were having with the elders. So, Tae-Kyung has no choice but to cancel his initial plan and just focus on his responsibilities in disappointment. To sum up, Wee Peng was worried about Jin Tae-Kyung's behavior because he had been plundering money from the family constantly. In fact, if the family had maintained its rules, Jin Tae-Kyung should have been executed by now. It is a miracle that Jin Tae-Kyung is still alive. If Tae-Kyung had to consult with the other family members, they would share Wee Peng's viewpoint on this matter. Tae-Kyung, on the other hand, chooses to side with Jin Tae-Kyung rather than reprimand his younger brother. But as he does so, he is gradually losing ground. However, in a flash of a finger, Tae-Kyung realizes that his brother has actually changed and offers him one last chance. Then he requested Wee Peng issue a decree in his name, ordering Jin Tae-Kyung, the third youngest master, to spend an indefinite period of time in the training cave for breaching the family's 14 sacred laws. As the memorandum was reported to Jin Tae-Kyung, Wee Peng asked the guard to restrain him. Jin Tae-Kyung just laughed it off and became enthused at the news because he hadn't anticipated how things would play out. Jin Tae-Kyung did not take the news well because all he asks for is a spare room so he can train rather than being detained in jail to train. And the worst part for him is that he is imprisoned indefinitely. Jin Tae-Kyung kept having temper tantrums, and Wee Peng became tired of them. He condemned him and explained that since he is being vigilant, the penalty may have gotten worse, But because Wick Young cares so much about him, he chose to handle the situation himself. The maximum amount of time that Jin Tae-Kyung could be imprisoned is at least 7 days. But as we all know, Jin Tae-Kyung negotiated for only 3 days in order to maintain his insane level of pride. However, Wee Peng is so fed up with Jin Tae-Kyung that he can feel the anger in Wee Peng's eyes as he tries to easily beat him. He simply listened to Wee Peng and did as he was told. Jin Tae-Kyung was promptly directed to the training cave, where Wick Young was waiting for him. Wick Young welcomes Jin Tae-Kyung with an air of tremendous disappointment, but underneath it all, he is deeply worried about him and can't stop thinking about Jin Tae-Kyung's state in the cave. But every emotion and question from Wick Young to Wee Peng regarding Jin Tae-Kyung was well managed. Wee Peng tried to divert Wick Young by bringing up the event involving the 100-year-old ginseng from a year prior, which was stolen by Jin Tae-Kyung. But Wick Young chose to focus on other topics instead. The events involving Wick Young's younger brother, the family's exterior and internal problems, the secret meeting of the Mount Heng sword sect, and their intentions all appear to be causing him an immense amount of anxiety. Wick Young then asks Wee Peng to inform the province of Shanxi to prepare for anything that might ensue with the Mount Heng sword sect. In the interim, Jin Tae-Kyung pushes himself to the edge by training as hard as he can with all of his strength and vitality. Despite the results he was able to attain thanks to his intensive training, his body was breaking down. Jin Tae-Kyung pays attention to his physical well-being and recalls carrying some grain pills inside the cave. But the smell of the goblin shit-scented pill was so offensive that he began to wonder if it was even safe for humans to ingest. Then he forced himself to take the pill despite its awful scent, believing that since it would only improve his body's condition, he should just take it regardless of the stench. Upon consumption of the pill, he immediately felt so much stronger and that his illness had been cured, so he stuffed himself with a lot of pills. He continued training harder than he actually did because he had so much energy, and as a result, he finished multiple tasks and succeeded right away. But he soon realizes that as he gets better, the tasks get harder. Progressively, he trained even harder than he already was, and kept rationalizing everything until he succeeded in every task and could carry it out without any qualms. Back in the real world, Jin awoke in Tae-Kyung's bed and wondered where his friend had gone. As he looked out the window, Jin noticed Tae-Kyung dozing off inside a game machine and made the decision to wake him up, even though Tae-Kyung was in a hypnagogic state. Tae-Kyung was suddenly woke up back in the game world. As he continued to push himself to improve, he eventually acquired 2 more levels in his quest and was given a ring. He was clearly happy with the progress he had made, and he keeps working hard since, in his opinion, it really pays off in the end. Tae-Kyung receives a notice informing him that a new feature, training mode, is now accessible to him, whereby he can now conjure the phantasms of his former adversaries. To his amazement, he can now call Hyuk Moo Jin an opponent, and he decided it was time to seek revenge. He was in wonder when he called forth Hyuk Moo Jin, because his opponent truly resembles what it appears to be in reality. Tae-Kyung merely tested Hyuk Moo Jin's 50% strength in their first combat, and he was easily able to defeat him since he found it to be quite simple. He chose to initiate Hyuk Moo Jin's 100% strength in their second fight. Meanwhile, in Jin's estate in Taiyuan, a new set of characters debuted. It was Lee Seogwang and his comrades from Mount Heng. As the battle between Tae-Kyung and the specter of Hyuk Moo Jin goes on, Tae-Kyung is dissatisfied because there doesn't seem to be any competition because he keeps on winning, and it seems like only his physical appearance is copied, not his fighting abilities. What is the point of his training if he keeps winning if the simulation is meant to highlight the differences between him and a stronger opponent? He asks himself, Tae-Kyung made the assumption that perhaps the reason he keeps winning is that the weapons are arbitrary and different. Tae-Kyung made the decision to install in Hyuk Moo Jin his family's spear and foot techniques so he could identify where his martial arts abilities were lacking. And the real combat begins. The combat between Jin Tae-Kyung and the phantasm of Hyuk Moo Jin continues and intensifies. As his battle with Hyuk Moo Jin comes to a nutshell, Jin Tae-Kyung gains another set of accolades and successes in his quest that raises him to level 14. which makes him thrilled as he completed those in just a matter of 5 days. This implies that his training is helping him and his skills, and he appears to be thriving from it. Suddenly, Jin Tae-Kyung got nostalgic for his family, especially his mother and sister, but it had to be cut short as soon as Wee Peng entered the room. Jin Tae-Kyung was asked to present himself in the big hall of politics, so Wee Peng went to fetch him. The esteemed members of the main family, the disciples of the Mount Heng sword sect, and Wik Young are all expecting him, and Jin Tae-Kyung has no inkling why any of it is happening. The meeting is giving Jin Tae-Kyung an awful sensation, so in order to make things better, he tried to divert everyone around him by making jokes. Wee Peng, however, is not having any of it, and asks Jin Tae-Kyung directly if he has any intentions to rape the young girl of the Mount Heng sword sect. Wee Peng's query left Jin Tae-Kyung in a state of total trepidation. On the way to the big hall, Jin Tae-Kyung continued arguing his position and defending himself. He even asks Wee Peng directly if he appears to be someone with the purpose to do so, but Wee Peng answers him with a resounding affirmative, though he assures him that his brother still has faith in him. When Jin Tae-Kyung enters the big hall, a tense atmosphere can be felt, and everyone appears to be geared up to punch him at any moment. However, he only concentrated on presenting and justifying himself as innocent in order to withstand the anxiety. He felt a bloodlust as he moved towards the aisle, which terrified the living daylights out of him. Jin Tae-Kyung sensed a wild, colossal viper behind him, which turned out to be Lee Seogwang. Jin Tae-Kyung appears to be in complete disbelief over everything that is taking place, and Lee Seogwang is haughtily delighted to keep Jin Tae-Kyung intact. There was a brief trip down memory lane. When Lee Seogwang reveals that Jin Tae-Kyung visited another brothel the night before the Crimson Flower, called the Radiant Moon, and reserved a night at the most expensive brothel, everyone is shocked. Jin Tae-Kyung's initial goal was to beg for forgiveness from everyone and flee the situation, but everything was already in place, including testimony that will serve as evidence of what Jin Tae-Kyung did at the Radiant Moon. It was Lee Chi-Gwan's testimonial that Jin Tae-Kyung was intoxicated when he entered a room, and Hwang Hai-chung later corroborated the testimony by claiming that the young miss of the Mount Heng sword sect screamed in her room. There are additionally multiple accounts from various sources linking Jin Tae-Kyung's harassment of the young woman. Even though Lee Seogwang was about to hit Jin Tae-Kyung in front of everyone in the room with all the evidence, Jin Tae-Kyung continues to reject these witnesses' accounts and is confused about what is actually going on. Jin Tae-Kyung is brave enough to assert that everything is absurd and that he is innocent. Thus, Jin Tae-Kyung was furious when Lee Seogwang threw all of the evidence they had against him in his face. After those exchanges, it was somehow inevitable that the two would fight. Yet something does not sit well with Jin Tae-Kyung about Lee Seogwang, and something is fishy about this guy. As the tension rises, Jin Tae-Kyung receives a surprise quest asking him to engage in combat with Lee Seogwang. He is torn as to whether to accept or reject the mission. Lee Seogwang, however, is eager for a fight, and the Jin family fortunately has stood up for Jin Tae-Kyung and is outraged at Lee Seogwang's demeaning mouth. Jin Tae-Kyung declined the quest, but is left with major consequences, such as Mount Heng sword sect declaring war on the Jin family of Taiyuan, and Jin Tae-Kyung being named an enemy of the faction. Lee Seogwang's declaration of war did not sit well with the Jin family, notably Wik Young, who criticized Lee Seogwang for his poor word choice. Lee Seogwang was certainly incensed by Wik Young's comments because of the egotistical man that he is. Lee Seogwang's father, who is also a sect leader, gave him full autonomy to use his authority and insisted on setting up a match for him and Jin Tae-Kyung. Lee Seogwang responded bluntly when Wik Young pressed him for an explanation of his motivations for taking those actions, stating that he wanted the Jin family to relinquish power over Taiyuan. The Jin family rejected Lee Seogwang's offer and the match with Jin Tae-Kyung because they were enraged by all he was doing. When Lee Seogwang finally gave them the only option left, which was war, everyone became even more enraged. After several hours of discussion, Jin Tae-Kyung eventually gave in to Lee Seogwang's proposal for a match, shocking the Jin family. The match between Lee Seogwang of the Mount Heng sect and Jin Tae-Kyung of the Taiwan-based Jin family was geared to commence. While people in the audience from both parties were filled with mixed emotions prior to the battle, Jin Tae-Kyung may have given the impression that everything was fine, but his mind was a maelstrom of doubts. He is truly insecure due to the level of distance between him and Lee Seogwang, which serves as another dimension to that fact. The intense bloodlust emanating from Lee Seogwang is so palpable that Jin Tae-Kyung worries more about avoiding being slain by him. Jin Tae-Kyung's assurance from his brother Wik-young through telepathy, however, that he will intervene if he believes Jin Tae-Kyung is in imminent danger, gives him a sense of certainty that he won't perish during the match, so he focuses on his defense. Jin Tae-Kyung's decision to accept the duel was subsequently questioned by Lee Seogwang, who assumed that Jin Tae-Kyung knew nothing about martial arts. If Jin Tae-Kyung declined the battle, he would be momentarily secure, but a conflict with Mount Heng was inevitably going to break out, and he would be forced to turn against both of those factions. It was only a matter of time before Jin Tae-Kyung gets assassinated or killed, because doing either would leave him in a fatal predicament. However, if he were to accept the task and withstand the beating, he would at the very least be able to save his life, and a chance would then arise. Since he has the ability to level up, he feels like he could genuinely defeat Lee Seogwang, which causes Lee Seogwang to laugh out loud at what he has stated due to how ridiculous Jin Tae-Kyung's sense of pride is. Lee Seogwang is questioned by Jin Tae-Kyung about whether or not he was the one who created the entire scenario. Lee Seogwang was provoked by his query, proving that he was the one who instigated the entire incident. Thus, Lee Seogwang's ferocious attacks at the start of the duel. Since Lee Seogwang was extremely enraged by Jin Tae-Kyung, the initial phase of the battle consisted entirely of Lee Seogwang's attacks. This was unquestionably an emotional outburst, and Jin Tae-Kyung was able to tell that Lee Seogwang was powerful while also feeling as though he could defeat Lee Seogwang. Jin Tae-Kyung swiftly strikes Lee Seogwang without giving him a chance to retaliate by using every technique he has learned during his training. Lee Seogwang had a subconscious flashback in which he recalled how he had been taught to use a sword as the first son of the Mount of Heng sword sect. Despite not being a prodigy, Lee Seogwang got to first-rate status at a very young age via his diligent training, making him the family's glimmer of hope. Considering Jin Tae-Kyung's track record, Lee Seogwang underestimated his abilities. Little did he know, however, that Jin Tae-Kyung would prove to be far stronger than he had anticipated, making him a more formidable foe in their duel. Everyone was in disbelief over what Jin Tae-Kyung had shown throughout the match, and Lee Seogwang's comrades were enraged about it, to the point that they had the match nullified. As the fight goes on, Wee Peng finds it impossible to grasp what he is witnessing. Jin Tae-Kyung, who was only able to reach the third-rate warrior rank, is beating Lee Seogwang's mount, the mount of the Heng Sword Sect's heir. Even Lee Seogwang's allies could not believe it, and demanded that the match be stopped and declared void because Lee Seogwang might be the victim of illicit strategies by the Jin family. Inside the house, there are rumors and assumptions that Wik-young could not bear to hear, and he abruptly punched one of Lee Seogwang's associates. Wei Peng attempted to mediate the situation, but Wik-young told him to stop. The finest moment in Wik-young's life might have been Jin Tae-Kyung's performance in the duel. On the other side, Lee Seogwang couldn't seem to comprehend Jin Tae-Kyung's actions as the combat was in progress. Lee Seogwang's pride and ego could not bear losing, and Jin Tae-Kyung once more set him off. Jin Tae-Kyung noticed that his opponent appeared to be losing, and he advised Lee Seogwang to just give up. In order to defeat Jin Tae-Kyung, Lee Seogwang uses all of his chi as well as all of his energy. Lee Seogwang attempted to hit Jin Tae-Kyung, but Jin Tae-Kyung just dodged it and countered every attack Lee Seogwang made, leaving Lee Seogwang in complete defeat and the Mount Heng sect's populace decimated. Jin Tae-Kyung succeeds in his quest and earns numerous rewards as well as level-ups. Wik-young is so incredibly proud of his brother that he actually sketched a painting of Jin Tae-Kyung defeating his opponents, which seriously perplexed Wee Peng given how much work Wik-young had to do. In the end, Jin Tae-Kyung solely evolved and became a divine hawk. Wik-young's remarks were commended by Wee Peng. They were then approached by a messenger pigeon carrying a note that might be dangerous in the upcoming chapters. When Lee Seogwang abruptly awoke from his slumber in his carriage, he immediately became frustrated as he remembered his fight with Jin Tae-Kyung and was still dumbfounded by all that had transpired, including his loss to Jin Tae-Kyung. Since Lee Seogwang exerted all of his chi and gave it everything he had, his body crumbled and his injuries became worse, as seen by the situation in which his body was in. Then, something enigmatic started to appear within the carriage, shocking Lee Seogwang with its identity and purpose. Lee Seogwang was meant to return to the Mount Heng sword sects, but he got diverted to the Northern Mounds, a burial site in the province of Henan. Lee Seogwang collapsed, or possibly died, as the entity vanished into thin air. While this was going on, Jin Tae-Kyung was trying to articulate what he had done throughout the battle in his training camp. Even though Lee Seogwang was under constant attack from him, he was still able to hold off most of them. And to make matters worse, Jin Tae-Kyung was able to avoid Lee Seogwang's strike, but it was still powerful enough to destroy him. This shows their chis may be where the differences in everything can be found. Although Jin Tae-Kyung has been effectively circulating his chi, things don't seem to be going as he had hoped, which is why the idea of taking spiritual pills suddenly occurred to him. Since nothing significant occurred to Jin Tae-Kyung within a week, a lot of things appeared to change in his life, and he was able to temporarily resolve problems. His fame, though, is currently his sole problem. The system tells him that due to the spreading of rumor regarding him defeating the Mount Heng sword, his fame has risen by 10. At a frantic gathering at Jin's Taiyuan estate, every member of the family was summoned. Some speculated that Wick Young contacted them at such a late hour because he was taking his role as the lesser family leader seriously, while others suggested that it was because of the altercation between Jin Tae-Kyung and Lee Seogwang. But then, all eyes shifted to him, and it was obvious that everyone was taken aback when the senior with the oldest rank, Jin Baek-yang, came. The Jin family has called a gathering, which is starting at Jin's property. Jin Tae-Kyung was once again perplexed by what was taking place. Although Jin Tae-Kyung and Jin Baek-yang had a connection through their gaze, Jin Tae-Kyung turned away out of fear for him. With Jin Tae-Kyung's memory loss, he has lost track of the fact that Jin Baek-yang is his grandfather and was introduced to him by Wick Young. Wick Young has started the interrogation with Jin Tae-Kyung and asks him immediately if he poisoned Lee Seogwang in order to cut to the chase. Again in disbelief, Jin Tae-Kyung defended his innocence in the alleged poisoning incident involving Lee Seogwang. However, Jin Tae-Kyung was questioned about whether he had any evidence demonstrating his innocence and lack of involvement. They should be the ones to present proof, not him. Jin Tae-Kyung was surprised to learn, when things start to get tense, Jin Baek-young asks them to settle down and enlighten him on everything that transpired, while also asking them to halt the noise. As the interrogation went on, everyone united against Jin Tae-Kyung. Some in the room believed that Jin Tae-Kyung might have poisoned his opponent just like the Tang family of Sichuan, who are expert assassins and practitioners of poison arts. Lee Seogwang's body, however, was not poisoned, and instead was simply injured internally, which was justified. People in the room don't seem to be thrilled about Jin Tae-Kyung's triumph, and believe that it could cause great destruction and dispute. If that happens, the only option they see is for them to hand over Jin Tae-Kyung's head. Wick Young was not amused to hear those statements and was on the edge of assaulting the men who thought that way, but fortunately, he was able to restrain himself. Since the battle was fair, Wick Young is certain that someone else planned to poison Lee Seogwang. Everyone is aware of the reality, but no one is certain who is responsible for it all. However, one thing is clear. The Mount Heng sword sect has picked up swords. Wick Young had instructed everyone to be prepared and armed since they never know when the battle will come and are bound to contend with it. Wick Young's behavior impressed Jin Baek-young, who was also pleased that the family's second-in-command was only a little boy when he was born, but that he had grown into a magnificent man. Then Wick Young expressed regret for his prior inappropriate behavior. Wick Young impressed Jin Baek-young, who thought it was an example of how the core family leaders ought to conduct themselves. Jin Tae-Kyung then remarked that it makes sense for everyone to band together to ward off any beasts that come knocking at their doors, and questioned why a core figure of the family speaks of sacrificing their own lives to put an end to war. Jin Tae-Kyung reminds everyone that it is crucial that they first unite the family, as they are on the verge of going to war after Jin Tae-Kyung expresses surprise at Jin Tae-Kyung's decision to side with him. Tae-Kyung was then asked by Jin Tae-Kyung to present the head of the family's core figure as a sacrifice, rather than Jin Tae-Kyung's head to the foe. That left the core figure in total shock. Since the core member of the family has been devoted to the main family for a long time, Tae-Kyung has made the decision to move on from the past. Jin Tae-Kyung has then passed down and let Tae-Kyung into the head of the family's place, since he is not there. However, Jin Tae-Kyung has a terrible feeling about what is happening. The Mount Heng sword sect sent a letter to the estate of the Jin that stated that they were mortal enemies under the heavens, which meant that they couldn't coexist under the same sky and would do whatever it took to put an end to the other person's existence. The only conclusion to be drawn from this is that a battle has begun, and everyone must get equipped for it. All had been advised that the Jin family of Taiyuan's warriors must immediately assemble before the main family. The system notified that the main quest war has begun. In the meantime, Tae-Kyung, Peng, and Jin Tae-Kyung are conversing with each other. Concerning Jin Tae-Kyung, Jin Tae-Kyung questions the pair. He was shocked to learn that the top leader is a martial expert who has gained one of the highest spiritual realms and is also an encyclopedia of information, making him the most dangerous person in the world of Murim. Jin Tae-Kyung is also the type to hide in the shadows and manipulate others. The three were convinced that Jin Tae-Kyung's behavior during the meeting had ulterior motives. However, it was all just speculation, and Jin Tae-Kyung is in fact a powerful ally. Tae-Kyung has also warned Jin Tae-Kyung to be cautious of Jin Tae-Kyung, but never turn the other side against him. Little did the two brothers know that the word of Li Xiaoguang's poisoning event had already traveled throughout Shanxi province, and that their family's reputation had already taken a hit within a single day. The lower district sect has responded to aid requests made by other factions for Tae-Kyung, and a new persona emerges who addresses herself as Secret, and she is here to get her compensation from the Jin family. In the mortuary where Li Xiaoguang's body is lying with his eyes open, his father, Li Qianbek, is so distraught over the loss of his son that he has promised to repay their loss 1,000 times over. His father gathered up the Mount Heng sect's soldiers and specifically orders them to kill Jin Tae-Kyung in retaliation. While Jin Tae-Kyung, Tae-Kyung, and Peng were in the room, the girl from the previous chapter entered. Although Jin Tae-Kyung initially thought the girl was foolishly looking for him, it turned out that she was involved in the Jin family's business, which shocked him. Tae-Kyung, on the other hand, was intrigued by how much Walhua and Jin Tae-Kyung knew about each other. Tae-Kyung was taken aback by Walhua's revelation that Jin Tae-Kyung frequented Crimson Flower in her confession. Tae-Kyung was also deeply appreciative of Walhua's and the district's lower sect's assistance. Tae-Kyung was then curious as to why they were willing to help them. Walhua's response was succinct and to the point. She explained that the lower district sect bases its decisions on gains and losses, and that after considering all the options, they believed that working with them and obtaining half of the Mount Heng Sword sect's stores and goods would still allow them to make a larger profit, even if the war results in a loss. Also because Walhua's is in love with Tae-Kyung's younger brother, Jin Tae-Kyung. Over the course of the following several hours, they negotiated. The lower district sect will have complete authority over its red light district, in exchange for not disclosing any information about the Jin family of Taiyuan to other groups, and for collecting any information about the war on behalf of the Jin family of Taiyuan. They had agreed to those conditions. The lower district sect and Jin family of Taiyuan have officially been on the same boat, and their alliance shall last until the end of the war. In order to establish greater intimacy with Jin Tae-Kyung, Walhua provides an exclusive bit of information as she leaves the Jin family estate. Tae-Kyung is absolutely floored by this knowledge. In Taiyuan, a tragedy occurred in the middle of the night that caused the assassination of children, and the entire community is now in despair. Everyone found it to be a nightmare, notably Wik-young and Jin Tae-Kyung. Why does it feel so genuine to Jin Tae-Kyung, even if everything is only visuals and illusions? Wik-young condemned the cruelty inflicted on those defenseless children on himself. Jin Baek-young, on the other hand, seems to have no concern about people who have passed away and sees everything as a byproduct and part of the conflict. As Jin Baek-young observes the corpses, he comes to the conclusion that Lee Cheon-baek, the head of the family of the Mount Heng sword sect known as Blade of Blood, was mostly responsible for the manner in which those victims were slaughtered, given that he upheld a nomadic lifestyle. But it was a no-help thing for everyone, especially in those moments, and Wik-young has stood up for those corpses since they are just kids and not warriors. However, it was inevitable anyway, since that is the true nature of war, a hard pill for them to swallow. While everything was going on, Jin Baek-young ran into Jin Tae-Kyung in the distance and informed him about the sleeping dragon of Shanxi rumor he had heard about Jin Tae-Kyung. After hearing what Jin Baek-young had to say about him, Jin Tae-Kyung felt cringeworthy and awkward. Jin Baek-young, who is sarcastically impressed by Jin Tae-Kyung, requested that Wik-young include Jin Tae-Kyung in the warrior force because he thought that someone with Jin Tae-Kyung's skill set should be on the front line of the ensuing battle. For Jin Tae-Kyung, it was a major shock, and despite the fact that it could look like he didn't want to take part in the conflict, Wik-young was certain that he could end up being of great assistance to everyone. And so, a new quest has begun for Jin Tae-Kyung. Although Wik-young thankfully places Jin Tae-Kyung in a different role, the Elder had originally wanted him to be assigned to the battle force that was directly under the leadership of the leaders. When Hyuk Moo-jin was included in Jin Tae-Kyung's team, he was surprised. After a little argue between family head and the Elder, Tae-Kyung was given the responsibility of leading the bodyguard reconnaissance unit, and the reconnaissance party has left and should reach its target in 2 days. Wik-young and Wee Peng saw a messenger bird that was carrying a message from the lower district sect. It claimed that a soldier known as One Word, One Kill Joe Pill and other portly men appeared in Zhengyang. Wik-young could not believe that their adversaries had already covered hundreds of li in only a few days and would soon arrive in Taiyuan. Wik-young has responded by ordering Wee Peng to send 50 of their men as quickly as possible in the direction of Zhengyang, where assistance is urgently needed. After initially forgetting where Jin Tae-Kyung and his colleagues were going, Wik-young eventually remembered. They were heading to Zhengyang. Jin Tae-Kyung has assembled his troops for a workout while they are on their way to their destination. In order to ascertain their abilities, he urged them to put forth their skills in front of him. It hasn't been too long since Jin Tae-Kyung taught his troops some martial arts techniques, and their abilities weren't at all horrible. They are roughly equivalent to them, rank F hunters with little experience using mana. However, those NPCs are far superior because they have access to some sort of chi. Jin Tae-Kyung, however, had Hyuk Moo-jin in a rage at what he was having them do. In light of Jin Tae-Kyung's lack of regard for time, war is therefore of little seriousness to him. Since time is of the essence, people shouldn't be idly passing it away. Instead, they should pay attention to what they are doing. Some, however, were able to approach things with lightheartedness and believed that there was perhaps a reason for everything, and Jin Tae-Kyung may have been going to teach battle formation after the practice time. Hyuk Moo-jin was bitter about it all, and still believes that Jin Tae-Kyung is still the third young master who has neglected his training in favor of pursuing women ever since he was a child. Since he continuously brings up Jin Tae-Kyung's history, Hyuk Moo-jin undoubtedly harbors a deep-seated hatred for him. He claimed that Jin Tae-Kyung is completely ignorant of both defensive tactics and fighting itself. Hyuk Moo-jin is apprised by Jin Tae-Kyung that anything he is doing at the moment is considered mutiny. He then expresses his hope that Hyuk Moo-jin understands this. Hyuk Moo-jin, however, persists in insulting Jin Tae-Kyung and denigrating his emotions, despite the fact that what is occurring may be a mutiny. Jin Tae-Kyung made the decision to deploy his position as the group leader of the reconnaissance team to resolve the conflict by giving Hyuk Moo-jin 3 slaps to the face. When Hyuk Moo-jin received 3 hefty slaps that caused him to fall to the ground, Jin Tae-Kyung abruptly ended the team's break and instructed everyone to prepare to leave, with Hyuk-Moo-jin's body being carried by the troop. They were also leaving their temporary location when a snowflake fell from the sky, signaling the start of winter. The Mount Heng sect initiated yet another attack, which resulted in the numerous deaths of innocent people, particularly children. People begged the killer to stop and let the kids go free, but the leader refused. The killing goes on and kills all the residents of the village. Even though the Great Brother believed they had slain every villager, a guy with 2 children who had crossed Zhengyang and was moving in the direction of Heng Shui managed to escape. One subordinate assures the Great Brother, however, that he has nothing to worry about, as he will take care of them as swiftly as possible. Thank goodness Jin Tae-Kyung and his group were able to find a shelter and move inside when the weather turned terrible. In response to what Jin Tae-Kyung did to punish him, Hyuk-Moo-jin abruptly comes out of his coma. Hyuk-Moo-jin attempted to get at Jin Tae-Kyung, but was knocked back by a kick from Jin Tae-Kyung, who then immediately threw Hyuk-Moo-jin. With Jin Tae-Kyung's abilities, the reconnaissance unit was astonished and seriously impressed. The troop requests that their leader, Jin Tae-Kyung, teach them all the necessary skills so that they can become better, since they were not able to travel to their location due to the weather. The offer from Jin Tae-Kyung's team is agreed upon. As soon as they stepped outside their cabin, they saw 2 toddlers walking through a dark forest in the freezing cold and snow. Jin Tae-Kyung was perplexed and found the situation odd. The kid named Seon Cheon was in a dream where he was free to explore, but his mother kept telling him, "You must survive," to remind him. Seo Cheon's mother is speaking to him, but he cannot understand what is happening, and his father has asked him to promise us that you will survive. Seo Cheon asked his father, "Where is everyone going?" since he still had no notion. However, he and his younger sister just instructed them to make a vow to everyone that they would live, and then everyone disappeared into the light. Then, Seo Cheon was roused from his sleep within a hidden cave where they had sought refuge with his little sister, and Seo Cheon muttered, "Shoot, I must have fallen asleep." Seo Cheon was present when his father and his Shuozhou people were brutally murdered a mere 5 days ago. He was condemning himself, hollering, "He was a useless bastard who could do nothing but run. He can't afford to let his guard down again." Seo Yul, his younger sister, was worried and asked, "When are they going back home?" Because she wants to see their mother, Seo Cheon reassured her and told him, "Just a little while longer. We're almost there." Because their mother was telling them in the dream that he must survive, Seo Cheon muses on his dream and says, the mother that he saw in his dream felt too real. Seo Cheon detected an odd sensation among the bushes. He boldly walked over to the bushes while in combat mode and yelled, "Who is it? Show yourself!" to the strange bushes. Seo Cheon was shocked to see their Uncle Gong there. After hearing Seo Cheon assert that they are starting to worry since it has been half a day, Seo Cheon's Uncle Gong tells them to go quickly because they are being tracked. Although Seo Cheon was shocked, his uncle said that there was no time to waste. Then, Seo Cheon inquired of his Uncle Gong as to their destination. Uncle responded to him by saying that they were headed to Heng Shui while they were moving. Uncle Gong told Seo Cheon and his sister Seo Yul that their enemies wouldn't pursue them there no matter how vicious they were, but unbeknownst to them, they were being watched and followed from behind. When Uncle Gong noticed something weird on the way they were moving, Seo Cheon asked him if it was bandits. Uncle Gong chastised himself for everything and pushed everyone to hurry before it started to snow, adding that there were about 10 of them and they were almost here. But Seo Cheon alleviates his uncle by saying, "Uncle, you did your best." After learning various martial arts, Seo Cheon told his uncle, if he were to die as a martial warrior, he would die while fighting for his life. But Seo Yul is then given to Seo Cheon by Uncle Gong, who also urges them to move quickly, since he will very soon catch up with them and tell them not to worry. As they hastily leave, Uncle Gong assures Seo Cheon, "I, Gong Ya-chung, am not a weak man." While rushing for their lives, Seo Cheon could not help but worry about his uncle's life and shouted, "Forgive me!" at him. Seo Cheon, together with his little sister Seo Yul, then reached Jin Tae-Kyung's cabin. Jin Tae-Kyung hurried his companions to begin moving since he felt strange about the two kids' arrival. Due to the poor weather and the horses' unsuitable state for movement, his fellow soldiers questioned his choice. Following that, a fighter queries Jin Tae-Kyung, "What about the child?" with regard to Seo Cheon. The warriors then approached Seo Cheon and his sister, but Jin Tae-Kyung became enraged and exclaimed, "What are you guys confused about? It's obvious something bad is about to happen whenever I get these ominous feelings," to his fellow soldiers. Seo Cheon sobbed bitterly in front of the warriors because he was relieved to see someone who could aid him and his sister. The enemies have then been sighted at the cabin of Jin Tae-Kyung, and a new quest has begun for him. Out of frustration, he expressed that he knew this would happen. Jin Tae-Kyung's task is to fight off the cruel and vicious Mount Heng Sword Sect's warriors and rescue those survivors. Jin Tae-Kyung commands his warriors to spread out and get into battle formation. It was 10 of Mount Heng Sword Sect's warriors versus 5 of Taiyuan that made Jin Tae-Kyung worried. Jin Tae-Kyung talked to himself and said that these guys barely know any martial arts and have no battle experience. Not to mention, Hyuk Mu-jin is still knocked out. To sum things up, Jin Tae-Kyung also said that if things go south, he will go and run pertaining to his comrades. His warriors then asked Jin Tae-Kyung, "What should they do, group leader?" In a flash, the adversaries move closer to the cabin, but Jin Tae-Kyung orders his team to get out of the offensive formation. His teammates were perplexed by his order to transition into a defensive formation. Jin Tae-Kyung ordered this because, after checking their level with Chi Sense, he realized that all of these guys are just some low-level scrubs. Jin Tae-Kyung laughs evilly and says he is going to devour their experience himself. "Pierce of heaven!" Jin Tae-Kyung says this as he strikes the Mount Heng sect's warriors without giving them a chance to defend themselves. The great Jin Tae-Kyung attacked every warrior to the bones, and as he approached the last fighter, it told him that the great brother will surely find him. But Jin Tae-Kyung remained so fearless of him that he let him say that as his final breath. Jin Tae-Kyung's quest had been completed right there and then. Jin Tae-Kyung and his comrades had rescued Uncle Gong and transported him to their cabin. Seo Cheon and Seo Yul were relieved that their uncle was safe, despite the fact that he was covered in bruises. Uncle Gong was so shocked to be awakened inside a cabin that he didn't know what he could do to reciprocate the reconnaissance troops' kindness. "He is very grateful for what they have done for them," Jin Tae-Kyung responded. "There is no need to be formal. He only did what was proper, because he was compelled to complete his task." Jin Tae-Kyung was intrigued by what had happened to the three of them, and Uncle Gong was willing to tell him what had occurred. Uncle Gong informs them that when a messenger bird arrived to convey the battle news around 5 days ago, the Shuozhou district had already been besieged. The Mount Heng Sword Sect recruited roughly 100 mercenaries, who mercilessly massacred their people and burned down their buildings. They were able to buy some time thanks to the district chief and his devoted warriors. They were able to collect the ladies and children and escape through a secret tunnel. They did, however, chase them after learning of their escape. Jin Tae-Kyung inquired, "How many pursuers are there?" Uncle Gong estimated that there were 30 of them, including Joe Pil. Jin Tae-Kyung was stunned to hear about the 30 pursuers and was eager to await the rest of them and battle them ruthlessly. He stated that they must wipe them all, because nasty bastards such as them cannot be allowed to live. Seo Cheon agreed with Jin Tae-Kyung that monsters like them ought to pull off their limbs and shred them apart with vengeful energy. Seo Cheon felt certain that everything was possible, especially with a martial master like Jin Tae-Kyung. Jin Tae-Kyung and Seo Cheon had the same viewpoints. Jin Tae-Kyung told him, "A man's words are worth 1,000 gold," and assures Seo Cheon that they will kill all of them and level up. Seo Cheon shows and gives Jin Tae-Kyung deep gratitude. Uncle Gong interrupted their chat by telling them that Joe Pil is a martial master who has reached the top realm. Jin Tae-Kyung is taken aback by this information. According to Uncle Gong, it is why when their branch leader saw Joe Pil, he accepted his defeat and instructed him to go with their people, also because no one has ever survived after facing him. Thus, all of Joe Pil's opponents have been killed as brutally as possible. Jin Tae-Kyung's initial plan was altered as a result of the information he acquired from Uncle Gong. He then told Seo Cheon that it is more important that he escort Seo Cheon and Seo Yul back to the main family. Jin Tae-Kyung has also given several reasons for not pursuing his first plan, including the fact that he is not feeling well and has sustained injuries as a result of the battle, as well as internal issues. But Seo Cheon was skeptical of everything Jin Tae-Kyung said. Seo Cheon was still impressed and idolized Jin Tae-Kyung and kept attempting to entice his attention. But Jin Tae-Kyung urged him to reserve whatever he had to say for later and ordered everyone to get ready to go because they were returning to the main family. Uncle Gong became inquisitive about Jin Tae-Kyung's name after a while and apologized for not asking it immediately, despite the fact that he saved their lives. But Jin Tae-Kyung was afraid to tell Uncle Gong his name because he was the major reason for everything and the killings. Jin Tae-Kyung thought to himself, wouldn't they want to try to kill him instead if they knew his name? However, Hyuk Moo-jin has regained consciousness and rushes furiously towards Jin Tae-Kyung, shouting his name. Uncle Gong was taken aback when he learned Jin Tae-Kyung's name. Meanwhile, Jo Pil and the soldiers of the Mount Hung sect have uncovered the bodies of their fallen companions. Wee Peng and his warriors are in a race against time to save and protect Jin Tae-Kyung from Jo Pil. One word, one kill Jo Pil is a monster who takes an interest and questions his opponent before ruthlessly killing them, according to Wee Peng, and he cannot let Jo Pil meet Jin Tae-Kyung. Wee Peng isn't thinking about setbacks in his quest, since he can't afford to face Jin Wik-young. Meanwhile, Jo Pil examined the remains of their fallen comrades and discovered that they were slain with only one strike by a spear user. Especially the last attack where Hook Sandos's chest was cleanly penetrated, Jo Pil remarked, delighted. Jo Pil wondered, who could it be? Is it a martial master from the Jin family of Taiyuan, or is it an unknown figure? Jo Pil was fascinated as to who murdered their buddies, but no matter what, the hunt will be satisfying. A messenger then reported that they had spotted a group of 7 or 8 figures, one of which appears to be injured, and that those individuals had abandoned their horses a day ago and were following the mountain ridges towards Taiyuan. Jo Pil was serious about confronting Jin Tae-Kyung and directed the messenger to continue following them down, but the conversation was stopped short when the 4 main heads of Mount Heng sect reminded Jo Pil of his purpose. But Jo Pil was not the type of guy to obey orders and be a follower, which stimulated him in certain ways. He ended up attacking his teammates and continued on the hunt for Jin Tae-Kyung. It is a key factor in why Jo Pil enjoys war because he can kill whoever he wants and not remember who he kills. Meanwhile, Jin Tae-Kyung and his forces were on their way back to Taiyuan when they discovered a location where they might take refuge for a short period of time to sleep. Jin Tae-Kyung then found himself having a chat with Uncle Gong while his troops were sleeping. He was taken aback by Uncle Gong's pretensions about him since he has not been sharing a word since the incident. It's always best not to listen to other people's rumors, stated Uncle Gong. Since he was told that Jin Tae-Kyung is known to be a lazy and arrogant bastard who does not know any martial arts, Uncle Gong can see that the Jin Tae-Kyung he's witnessing is nothing like those rumors. Jin Tae-Kyung, on the other hand, is taken aback by what Uncle Gong has said about him and is unsure how to react to it. As the rumor regarding Jin Tae-Kyung turned out to be inaccurate, Uncle Gong wonders how much he should believe the rumors behind their war with the Mount Heng sword sect. Uncle Gong coughs up an excessive amount of blood, which makes Jin Tae-Kyung jittery. Jin Tae-Kyung was aghast to learn that the weapons used to kill him were loaded with poison, as revealed by Uncle Gong. Concerned about Jin Tae-Kyung, he asked Uncle Gong, why didn't he tell them about it sooner? But according to Uncle Gong, the poison that was used must have been a cheap one because the effects were pretty weak. However, once his condition deteriorated, it was too late for him to do anything about it. Jin Tae-Kyung is concerned about his status because he is in a critical condition. Jin Tae-Kyung searches for an antidote that could heal Uncle Gong's illness right away, but all he finds are shields and weapons. Uncle Gong was in terrible health, and he begged Jin Tae-Kyung to do him a favor. He shall entrust the children in his care, Uncle Gong remarked to Jin Tae-Kyung. That put Jin Tae-Kyung in a bind. A new quest has then begun for Jin Tae-Kyung again, to escort both Seo Cheon and Seo Yul back to their homes. After accepting Ya Chung's last request, Tae-Kyung traverses through the snow-filled forest while carrying a sleeping Seo Yul on his back. As he takes a step in the snow, Jin Tae-Kyung contemplates his decisions and his feelings towards the lives of the NPCs, saying that they are supposed to be one-dimensional characters, but are actually very realistic characters. There is no need for him to act like a hero, for it may compromise the lives of the members of the team. He then reminds himself that the world he is in is just a game. But that does not ignore the fact that he still feels bad, which annoys him. He cannot risk losing his life for a family made with graphics because he has a family to go back to in reality. Before they left the cave, Tae-Kyung told everyone in the unit about Gong Ya-Chung's request. They strongly expressed their disapproval of the idea of leaving Gong Ya-Chung behind. Tae-Kyung explains that Gong Ya-Chung is in a terrible state, to the point that he will only end up harming the group. The members tried suggesting ways in which they could avoid leaving Gong Ya-Chung behind by mentioning that they could carry him. Despite their determination, Tae-Kyung's decision will not waver because the weather is not in their favor, and they will be carrying a full-grown adult across the snowy forest. They would be exerting too much energy, which would force them to rest, which would also allow the enemy to catch up to them. The enemies are mercenaries that are led by a martial master, and with this information, he asks everyone if they can survive that battle. The members remained silent. Even the egotistical Mu Jin could only grit his teeth as he obliged to Tae-Kyung's commands. Back to the present, a conscious Seo Yul shares a bit of her father's story with her carrier. But what stands out in her storytelling is when she tells Tae-Kyung that her father left to go play with their mother, which sparks a memory for Tae-Kyung. Flashes of memories of his father's funeral and his family's grief went through his head, which made him look back at Seo Cheon. As he looks at him struggling to seem okay, he can only think that it is okay to act his age and let out his emotions. It is fine if he needed someone to carry him, but he is such a stubborn kid. A kid who reminded him of his younger self when he was his age. "Screw this," Tae-Kyung mutters. He then stops for a moment and hands over Seo Yul to the other team members before sprinting in the opposite direction to Gong Ya-Chung's location. He sprints for a while and manages to reach Gong Ya-Chung's location, but is surprised by who is with him. Han Yop, who is the youngest subordinate of Tae-Kyung, can be seen. Tae-Kyung disregards his own ideas for now and lend a hand. In a different area, we can see two suspicious people conversing in a dark room. The two of them are reporting to each other about the circumstances that have happened over the past few days. It is revealed that the two suspicious figures are the head elder and the assassin who instigated this war. They plan on using this war to get one step closer to achieving the head elder's goal of achieving power and status. In a safe area, the reconnaissance unit rests as Tae-Kyung watches over the ill Ya-Chung. Tae-Kyung plans to get everyone to leave, but before he can get to speak, Hyuk Mu Jin relays it before him. Tae-Kyung is speechless from what just happened, but ignores it and calls out to Seo Yul. But before he finishes his sentence, Hyuk Mu Jin also takes initiative on that before Tae-Kyung does anything. Instead of being speechless, this time Tae-Kyung is annoyed by his sudden change of attitude, but disregards it. As they get ready, ominous sounds that came from the forest catch everyone's attention. Everyone gets into formation, and what comes out of the woods verifies their concerns. A pack of blood-hungry wolves comes out, which makes Tae-Kyung sigh in relief. He really thought that it was the enemy mercenaries, but he became relaxed after seeing what he saw. He commands everyone to protect the children and maintain formation. The wolves began to sprint towards the reconnaissance unit, but for some reason they diverted their direction somewhere else. Everyone is naturally surprised by the fact that a pack of wolves began running away from them, but this hypes up Tae-Kyung, for he thinks that he is the reason for this phenomenon. The status window pops out of nowhere, and Tae-Kyung expects a notification for his feat, but it turns out to be a quest notification. The quest explains that Tae-Kyung has to come to confront Joe Pill, but a certain fine print worries the tragic gamer. It says that he has no choice but to accept the quest, and it will automatically be accepted. Tae-Kyung thinks that his eyes are playing tricks on him. But in reality, there was someone standing behind him in the woods. Joe Pill stands there ominously with his blade in hand and greets his soon-to-be opponent. Tae-Kyung realizes that the wolves weren't avoiding him, but Joe Pill's bloodlust. Joe Pill tells them to lower their guard by telling them that he is just there to talk as he slowly approaches them. Jin Tae-Kyung dismisses his enemy's words, for they may be a diversion that will let the rest of the enemies catch up to them. Irritated by his assumption, Joe Pill reassures him that his men are still an hour away, so there will be enough time for him to end them by himself. He then proceeds to tell Tae-Kyung that he does not hold any grudges but has interests in him instead, so he proposes that if Tae-Kyung manages to answer all his questions, he will let him go. He thinks about it before accepting his proposal. Moments later, we can see Joe Pill laughing his ass off as the sun rises. He tears up from laughter after listening to his entire training arc. Despite being in a state of disbelief, Joe Pill tells Tae-Kyung that he will uphold his promise to let him go. As they prepare to leave, Joe Pill clarifies his statement that he meant that he would only let go of Tae-Kyung, not the entire unit. Joe Pill tells Tae-Kyung to abandon everyone he came with in exchange for his own freedom, and he would be super disappointed if he refused. After thinking about the lives at stake, he tells Joe, "Then go get disappointed, you shitty human." Joe Pill likes his answer and dashes towards Tae-Kyung at great speed before attacking him. Jin Tae-Kyung manages to block the attack, but is sent flying towards the unit, knocking them down. He tries to gather his thoughts after receiving an attack of that caliber for the first time. He gets back up, but he is going through a case of jelly legs. Joe Pill notices Tae-Kyung trembling, so he tells him that he will do something about that shaking. He then tosses a flurry of blades towards the unit, which was blocked by Tae-Kyung, but unfortunately, one of the blades manages to hit one of the members in the throat. Tae-Kyung tries to call out to him, but he can't because he cannot remember the soldier's name. While Tae-Kyung's guard is down, another blade hits the injured soldier in the middle of his forehead, instantly killing him. The fact that he cannot remember his name frustrates him. NPCs are normally forgettable characters in games, so this confuses Tae-Kyung, for he feels consumed by anger over the loss of an NPC. He then pulls out a grain pill from his inventory and consumes it. While chewing the pill, Tae-Kyung taunts Joe Pill and begins initiating the attack. He then sends a flurry of spear attacks towards Joe Pill, but cannot land a single hit on him. Joe Pill is impressed by his opponent's skills, but at one point, he lowers his guard, which allows Tae-Kyung to almost stab him. Joe Pill was planning on going easy on him, but his ego for being a peak martial artist kicks in, and he gets ready to go all out. He gets into a frenzy state, which strengthens the user and sends out a flurry of attacks. Tae-Kyung is backed into a corner and tries to gather his thoughts, but he notices the other members of the unit are sneaking up behind Joe Pill, so he tries to tell them to stay away from them, and not for any noble reason. He just does not want his title effect to disappear once the one-on-one fight turns into a team versus one. Joe Pill then attacks Jin Tae-Kyung, which he manages to block, and the other members attempt to land a sneak attack, but Joe Pill notices them. Joe Pill manages to break the other members' weapons with his bare hands and lands a counterattack on them. This gives Tae-Kyung an opening, and he takes it by attempting to land a blow on the back of Joe Pill's head. However, Joe Pill not only dodges the attack, but also lands a blow on his side. But luckily for Tae-Kyung, he managed to tilt his body enough to not receive a fatal blow. He then tries to understand what just happened, but out of nowhere, Joe Pill goes for another attack that goes through all of Jin Tae-Kyung's defenses and hits him. Joe Pill praises Tae-Kyung for his endurance, and as a reward, he ignites his hand before striking Tae-Kyung's chest. He was sent flying across the woods before landing on a tree. Tae-Kyung spits out blood, and he can barely stand, which impresses Joe Pill once more, for he managed to survive one of his mastery skills. Tae-Kyung then tries to stab his opponent with his spear, but Joe Pill manages to catch the spear with his flaming hand. Joe Pill tells him that there is no chance of him winning at his current level. Tae-Kyung cannot help but feel defeated, but he then lets go of the spear and tries to hit his opponent with his bare fists. He tries to gather as much chi as he can and attack his vital spot, but that backfires on him. He suddenly felt a bunch of stinging pain and spit out more blood before falling to the ground. Jo-Pil's attack blocked Tae-Kyung's chi circulation, and any attempts to gather any chi will lead to chi deviation or death. Tae-Kyung begins to have a breakdown as Jo-Pil crouches down and attempts to finish off his opponent. But thankfully his attention is diverted when the other members call out to him. He tells Tae-Kyung that he will finish off the others first before killing him. Then Tae-Kyung mumbles something that catches Jo-Pil's attention, which makes him clarify what he said. Then Tae-Kyung screams that he has been fighting like an idiot before pulling out a dagger from his inventory. Tae-Kyung manages to slash Jo-Pil's Achilles tendon, knocking him to the ground. Tae-Kyung, with his newfound determination, proceeds to spam the equip function on the dagger and repeatedly stab Jo-Pil in the leg. Jo-Pil manages to stop Tae-Kyung's constant stabbing by breaking his wrist with one hand and striking him in the chest with the other. Tae-Kyung was sent flying back to the tree where he landed earlier and fell to the ground. Jo-Pil, on the other hand, pulls out the dagger lodged in his leg and gets back up. He observes his fallen opponent and compliments him for his persistence before setting his hands ablaze to finish him off. The other members manage to reach the two, but unfortunately, Jo-Pil begins to launch his final attack. Unknowingly for Jo-Pil, Tae-Kyung grins before receiving a powerful blow to the chest. Blood was spat and shed, but it was not just Tae-Kyung's blood. Jo-Pil begins to tremble and drip tons of blood as he begins to panic. The other members can only observe what is happening. Jo-Pil's skin turns red, his veins begin to pop out, and his eyes and mouth begin to pour out blood. He was confused by the fact that he thought that Tae-Kyung was empty-handed. Tae-Kyung then lets out a wide grin that has been smeared with blood and begins to explain that he was waiting for Jo-Pil to gather his chi at the heist peak and used his own thought process against him. But he did not use any martial arts technique. He just simply pulled out a blade from his inventory and stabbed him in the gut. Jo-Pil begins to roar in pain and frustration so loudly that it echoes throughout the forest. He falls to his knees and begins to mumble his frustrations about his current condition. Tae-Kyung thinks he can finally rest because he does not have any more energy, but Jo-Pil manages to get up and emit more energy. Tae-Kyung is confused about what is happening and how Jo-Pil has this much strength left. Jo-Pil's hair began to turn white, which made Tae-Kyung realize that he was using his own life force instead of chi out of desperation. Tae-Kyung reaches for his spear and thinks about what he has to do next. He has no more energy, and he has a broken arm, so he cannot block the attack. He realizes that he has no choice but to use the unknown source of chi inside of him, which will be a gamble. Death by Jo-Pil or death by chi deviation. He taps into the unknown source of chi and begins to emit light out of his abdomen. Strength begins to overflow inside of him, but before he gets to understand what is happening, Jo-Pil dives into Tae-Kyung's direction. We then get to see a flashback in reality where we can see Tae-Kyung sitting in the middle of a room where everyone is surprised by something he did. They are currently in a training facility, and in front of Tae-Kyung is what used to be a training dummy. The dummy is now broken down into pieces by Tae-Kyung, which surprises the facilitator, who has been working there for years. He says the attack that Tae-Kyung just did was equivalent to a D rank, despite being an F rank. This gave new hope to Tae-Kyung, and he rushed to pack up and leave to change his rank, but the facilitator then burst his bubble. He tells Tae-Kyung that it is not enough to get a rank change. Yes, he managed to do an attack that is equivalent to a D rank, but the fact that he only did it once, and now he is out of stamina, proves that he is not fit to get a rank promotion. The facilitator reassures him that he can get the promotion once he improves the basics of his training. He also reminds him to only use that skill when there is an emergency, and he is also curious if he gave the skill a name. Piercing with all his might. He screams the name of the skill as he clashes the attack with Jo-Pil, and then light begins to shine brightly in the center of the two. The impact of the collision of the attacks sent a shockwave throughout the snowy forest, leaving a cloud of dust and snow at the epicenter. Moments later, the cloud began to dissipate, and what was revealed were pools of blood. Tae-Kyung is barely able to hold on to his spear as his arm trembles due to the fact that the muscles in his arms are fried. His spear shatters, and both Tae-Kyung and Jo-Pil are barely able to stand. Once the cloud finally clears out, Tae-Kyung drops to the ground as notifications from the status window pop out. It says that he managed to complete his quest of defeating the one-word, one-strike Joe Pill, and he will receive his rewards momentarily. In front of the fallen Tae-Kyung is the lifeless corpse of Joe Pill, and as he falls into unconsciousness, someone walks in front of the corpse. Seconds later, Joe Pill's head falls in front of Tae-Kyung's barely conscious body. Screams of anguish and accomplishment coming from Seo-cheon echo throughout the forest, for he has finally attained vengeance for his fallen family. Later on, we are back in another flashback from reality, where Tae-Kyung and a group of adventurers celebrate when they receive their raid rewards. They received multiple large magic gems that can be worth hundreds of dollars each. Tae-Kyung cries tears of joy when he receives hope that he and his family can finally move to a safer district. Another member of the raid team asks Tae-Kyung if it is normal to receive this many gems, but he does not get a response when he is currently thinking of what to do with his newfound fortune as money symbols appear in his eyes. Another member consoles the ignored member by telling them that it is actually pretty rare for this amount because the normal amount would be 1 or 2 gems in an F-rank gate. And if you are lucky, the highest would be 5 pieces, but they have already received a large amount and have yet to finish their raid. They are almost at the end of the raid, and the boss zone is nearby. Tae-Kyung is fired up by the possible rewards, but their leader keeps a clear head and wants to further analyze the situation. The monsters they have been facing have all been common goblins, so it does not make sense that there are any magic gems at the gate, which he finds suspicious. Tae-Kyung rebuts the leader, for he thinks that it is strange that he wants to abandon the raid despite the rewards. The leader tries to be considerate of the others, but plans on taking everyone on the safe route by calling it a day. However, everyone else was consumed by greed and was led by a very greedy Tae-Kyung, who overpowered the raid leader to the point where he gave in and agreed. The others were happy with what they were hearing, but later on, they would regret their decisions. Moments later, Tae-Kyung is having a meltdown as he watches his team members being torn apart by what seems to be a dragon-like monster. The raid leader is slowly bleeding out as he crawls to Tae-Kyung. His final words were ordering Tae-Kyung to run away before getting stomped and eaten by the monster. All of the team members have died except Tae-Kyung, and the team leader tells Tae-Kyung to run away as his final words before he dies. The fear wakes Tae-Kyung back into the Murim world. That flashback was a dream, and now he finds himself wrapped up in bandages in a room where Waipeng waits for his awakening. A medical examiner informs the newly conscious Tae-Kyung that he was unconscious for 5 days, and since he was in critical condition, the head physician stated that he probably would not even make it to the next day. After hearing those words, Tae-Kyung became so enraged that if the others had not stopped him, he would have probably beat the head physician to death. Waipeng then tells Tae-Kyung that he has both good news and even better news for Tae-Kyung. The good news is that the survivors from the Shuozhuo region have all safely returned to their homes, and from his group, only 2 suffered injuries, but they were not in life-threatening conditions. Tae-Kyung then solemnly asks Waipeng if they managed to recover the unknown member's corpse. Waipeng responds by telling them that they were able to give him a proper burial. It turns out that the unknown member was an orphan, which means that he does not have any family to pass on his belongings. Waipeng notices that Tae-Kyung is feeling down about the loss of a fighter, so he tries to comfort him by explaining that warriors are not people who seek to receive protection. Warriors must fight enemies in order to prove their existence, even if the opponent they encounter kills them, as they are much stronger than them. That is why the ones who are living must remember them in their hearts and carry them to the place of their dreams so that their deaths will not have been in vain. Tae-Kyung takes his words to heart and manages to smile as he wonders what the dreams of the people who passed were. Waipeng breaks the emotional mood by telling Tae-Kyung that the unknown warrior's dream was to become the greatest martial master under the heavens. This makes Tae-Kyung choke, and Waipeng continues to joke around with him. After all those laughs, Tae-Kyung is back to his normal self, and he thanks Waipeng for that. Waipeng then proceeds to tell Tae-Kyung about the even better news. 2 days ago, a big battle ensued. 100 elite warriors of the main family had a fight with 200 vanguard warriors of the Mount Heng sword sect at Heng Shui. Long story short, they had an overwhelming victory where only 30 warriors of the Mount Heng sword sect survived and escaped. That number is the same as the number of warriors that were injured on the side of the main family. Although they weren't able to capture the lesser family head of the Mount Heng sword sect, they were still able to defeat the two martial masters in the Peak Realm who were under his jurisdiction, known as the Twin Demons of Mount Heng. It was a tough fight, but the twin demons were defeated and killed by Wick Young and Wei Peng in one-on-one fights. The demons put up a fight that received praise for being half bad from their own killers. Tae-Kyung thinks that he almost got killed in his last fight, but Wei Peng had a fight with a martial master in the same spiritual realm as his opponent, and he says he wasn't half bad. Wei Peng sips on his tea before expressing his praise for Tae-Kyung. He is so impressed to the point that words cannot express how he felt when he learned that Tae-Kyung took down Joe Peel. This amount of praise makes Tae-Kyung chuckle and become flustered. But all that comes to an end when Wei Peng tells him about all the past incidents that Tae-Kyung caused that make his blood boil. Nobody expected a person like Tae-Kyung, especially with his reputation, to become a respectable and dependable figure, which makes Wei Peng really impressed while emitting his anger for him. Tae-Kyung really wishes to get cussed out by Wei Peng, instead of being on the receiving end of his passive aggressiveness. Tae-Kyung expresses that he only won by luck when Joe Pil let down his guard, but Wei Peng thinks otherwise, for stuff like letting one's guard down or being attacked by a hidden weapon is just an excuse. Tae-Kyung won purely on skill, and only the strongest can survive in the world of Murim. This makes Tae-Kyung happy because he thinks that he is stronger than Martial Master Joe Pil, but Wei Peng relentlessly pops his bubble. He tells him that Joe Pil is way stronger than Tae-Kyung by a mile, and that he was just strong enough to kill him by using underhanded methods. Evidently, the Mount Heng sword sect received a massive blow from this incident. Not only did they lose 3 martial masters in their peak realm, but they also lost their justification as to why they started this war. Wick Young steps into the room and continues to explain that Tae-Kyung is strong enough to not rely on cheap, petty gimmicks like poison. Wick Young then begins to run towards his brother in tears and begins to hug him with such great force that Tae-Kyung begs him to let go and constantly reminds him that he is a patient. Later in the night, in a different area, a man can be seen being punched in the face and falling to the ground. Another man strongly displays his disappointment in his son for causing their defeat. It turns out the man in question is the head of the Mount Heng sect. He gathers the attention of everyone present in the room and announces that they have suffered great losses for being overconfident, which led to them lowering their guard. He commands everyone to do whatever is necessary to gain more soldiers, even if it is in an illegal manner. He then tells them to disregard everything and focus on gaining power, because if they lose the war, not only will they lose their honor but their lives as well. He gives them 4 days to gather recruits, and after that, they will attack the Jin family once more. Medical examiners are astonished at what they are seeing when they remove Tae-Kyung's bandages. For the past 10 years that they have worked at the infirmary, this is the first time they have seen a recovery this quickly. One of the examiners mentions that Tae-Kyung's recovery rate should not be that fast, even if he consumed the 100-year-aged ginseng. This catches his attention, and the examiner quickly realizes that Tae-Kyung told them that he lost his memories. He then tells Tae-Kyung the background story of how, about a year ago, the medicinal hall's storage was completely cleaned out, which makes Tae-Kyung realize the person they were talking about was the original trashy version of Tae-Kyung. The head physician was enraged by what happened back then. Even if one had a lot of money, acquiring ginseng is not a simple task. Tae-Kyung has consumed ginseng, which is a spiritual medicine that can instantly increase one's internal qi by 20 years. This makes Tae-Kyung realize that the unknown source of qi that was inside of him came from consuming the ginseng. And now he swears at the original Tae-Kyung for not realizing how amazing the ginseng was. The examiners leave Tae-Kyung awkwardly as he continues to become frustrated by his and the original Tae-Kyung's actions. Moments later, Tae-Kyung can be seen smiling widely as he checks out the rewards of his labor. He gained a lot of this after all that hard work. He gained 13 levels, taking him from level 17 to level 30. And not only did he gain a lot of fame, but the amount of chi he has increased as well. He begins to become emotional as a result of his growth. From being a warrior who was scared by a weak bandit to a warrior capable of defeating martial masters who are in their peak realm. But there was one more thing he got from his efforts. He also gained a new skill called One Strike. But a certain detail about the skill catches his eye. It says that he can control how much stamina and chi are consumed. Compared to his weaker body back in reality, he hypothesizes that he might be able to use it more frequently and efficiently with his current self. As he continued to walk around the area outside, bystanders began to talk and stare at him. They gossip about his feats and efforts, which earned their genuine respect for the former bastard Tae-Kyung was. He cannot help but feel flustered by their reactions, so he greets them back and smiles. But that smile was not just for the public, but for the fact that, because of the rumors about him that spread throughout the town, he is gaining more fame as we speak. The bystanders' reaction could also be caused by the fact that Wik-young reenacted the iconic Lion King scene by lifting Tae-Kyung outside his window. This atmosphere makes Tae-Kyung enjoy his new game life, which makes him a bit afraid of games. He is now more determined to leave the Murim world, since there are only 2 more conditions that he needs to meet before he can log out. The fame condition can gradually be completed over time, but the only remaining issue is his rank. He has no idea what to do to increase his rank, so he looks for an expert's advice. Tae-Kyung went to his older brother, Wik-young, for advice at his office. But before Tae-Kyung asks anything, Wik-young tells him that the Mount Heng sword sect is planning to recruit more soldiers, which is why they plan on attacking their main forces before they have the chance to do so in 2 days. They make stern eye contact with one another, but deep inside Tae-Kyung, he is actually sweating buckets and worries if he will be able to log out by then. Wik-young then mentions that the 5 gates of Shanxi have decided to assist them, so he wishes Tae-Kyung to take part of their forces in the rear guard. A quest notification pops up, telling him about what Wik-young just said and the penalties and rewards for this quest, which will either gain or lose fame by 10 points, depending on whether Tae-Kyung decides to join or not. Tae-Kyung accepts the quest, and then proceeds to ask Wik-young for advice. He feels stuck in the second-rate realm, which confuses Wik-young, for he thinks that Tae-Kyung is first-rate. They had a back-and-forth debate about whether or not he was first-rate or second-rate. Wik-young stops the debate by asking who told him that he was second-rate. It's not like he can say that the system told him that, so he comes up with the excuse of that person being himself. Wik-young then gets up and dips his index finger into his tea. He begins to write what Tae-Kyung hopes is something that he can use, but ends up writing the word belief. Tae-Kyung begins to tremble tremendously in confusion before Wik-young explains that he just has to believe in himself because martial arts begin with belief. This sends Tae-Kyung into a deep trance as he begins to gather his thoughts. What did he believe in? What was he believing in this whole time? He comes to the conclusion that it was the system. It was the reason why he kept saying that he was a second-rate warrior. He believed that the system was designed to only tell him the truth. This makes him question the system and everything he knows about it. He then comes to another conclusion by hypothesizing that the system is a mere reflection of himself. He then thinks back to all the victories he had on his journey. Screw this, then there is no way I am still a second-rate warrior. I am already a first-rate warrior, Tae-Kyung thinks to himself. Light begins to flash before him, and the system notifies him that he has attained the first-rate spiritual realm, and all his levels and skills begin to greatly improve and increase. Tae-Kyung begins to do random poses and begins to gain a point of fame for each pose as he greets the people of his town. His fame is not rising anymore since everyone has practically heard about him, so he resorts to doing desperate things during these desperate times. In the crowd of bystanders, one of them bows to Tae-Kyung and introduces himself as the protector of the third gate. His name is Jun, and at first Tae-Kyung thought he was a regular bystander like the rest and moved on. A few steps had passed before they realized that they were from the 5 gates of Shanxi. He quickly runs back to them, and they confirm that his information was correct. They exchange their greetings properly this time, and Tae-Kyung is internally very glad for the fact that they are there to raise his fame and fight in his stead. They want to converse further over a cup of tea, but unfortunately for them, Tae-Kyung has to take his leave, for he has to head to the medicinal hall and points out that outsiders are forbidden from entering. Later inside, we can see Mujin and Han Yop still recovering from their wounds from Jo-Pil's attack. Jo-Pil's skill still scares Mujin and makes him call him a monster. Han Yop then tells him it is because Jo-Pil was a martial master in the Peak Realm. Mujin then asks Han Yop if he is okay with the idea of them being weak. Han Yop replies by saying that he already knew that he was weak, but he could never accept it. So after a moment of silence, he decides that he will do his best to become stronger, even as strong as or surpassing Jo-Pil. This makes him feel better for himself, and he uses it as a newfound source of determination. But this still surprises Mujin. Mujin then tells him that he will accomplish that, and they both smile at each other's newly determined faces. As they continued to converse, someone was listening in behind a door. It was Tae-Kyung, and he shrivels up from how cringeworthy their conversation is going. He was planning on giving them a farewell before the beginning of the war, but he decided to leave with the satisfaction of seeing his comrades happy. Before Tae-Kyung leaves, a familiar face comes in. It was the young Seo Yol eating a cookie as she greeted her savior. She then drags him to a room where her brothers Seo Cheon and Ya Chung are. Ya Chung is practically all healed, so he has been recuperating for a long time. Ya Chung then brings up his hopes that the preparation of the war will go smoothly, which surprises Tae-Kyung since he thought only the main forces knew about it, and worries if everyone, including spies in town, knew about the war. He then puts his worries aside since he thinks that they will soon have nothing to do with him in the future. He proceeds to reassure Ya Chung that everything is going smoothly. Ya Chung is glad to hear that, and also tells Tae-Kyung that he managed to recover his belongings from the fight. Seo Cheon then hands over a large box wrapped in cloth and says that it contains the items that he wasn't able to recover. They both urge Tae-Kyung to open it when he gets the chance, away from suspicious eyes. He wonders what is inside the box and proceeds to open it moments later. It contained a few items that were very rare. It includes the Divine Palm of Fire skill, the Burning Flames pill, and a nameless sword. He thinks of these items as bait from the system to get him to continue playing the game a bit longer. He turns away from the items, determined that he won't fall for the bait. But his greed is making him weigh the choices that he has to make. Like, what if he consumes the pill and learns the Divine Palm of Fire? Would he be able to summon fire from his hands like Jo-Pil? At the same time, the description of the effects of the items requires mastery over them if Tae-Kyung does not want to be consumed by his own flames and die. He then snaps back to his common sense and prioritizes his own safety, and anything that strays away from that will get him killed. He needs a bit more time as his fame builds up, along with his chances of getting out of the game. Later that night, in a different part of town, Elder Baek-yang can be seen conversing with a cloaked figure and reporting that everything is going smoothly. The day the two great families of the province of Shaanxi collide with one another is coming, and everything will finally come to an end as the new era shall begin. Baek-yang begins to emit an ominous energy as he reminds himself of his plan to become the family head of the Jin family of Taiyuan, and he will be the one who will reunite the province of Shaanxi and become its ruler. Later in the next couple of days, a loud beat from a drum can be heard beating along with Tae-Kyung's heartbeat as he counts how many more points will be needed to go home. He is still far from fulfilling the requirement, and unfortunate for him, everyone in Taiyuan has heard of his rumors, which means that he cannot gain any more passive points of fame. He cusses softly as he stands in front of a platoon of warriors and begins to think that he actually needs to participate in the war. Tae-Kyung stands in front of hundreds of warriors as they wait for the announcement. A few minutes have passed before Wick-Young comes out and stands on his pedestal in front of the people who waited for his arrival. He begins to announce that their enemies outnumber them in the number of warriors and martial masters in the Peak Realm. This information would naturally dampen the determination of the warriors before him, But he follows it up by telling them that their enemies are no different from wolves with multiple heads. The enemy forces are composed of thugs, greedy mercenaries, and bandits who shamelessly steal. They do not have a shred of dignity or honor within them. He pauses for a moment and lets the silence and tension build up in the atmosphere. He continues his speech by telling them that it will be a hellish battle that may cost them their lives, but they will most definitely emerge victorious. The worthy shall survive. He embeds this quote into everyone's minds as a reminder that they have to put everything they have on the line and survive until the end. Wik-young's passion for victory and his speech motivate the warriors so much that they begin to scream out their passion so loudly that it can be heard echoing throughout the town. They then embark on a journey that will lead them to the battlefield. Hundreds of warriors threaded through tough and rough terrain for miles all day. Later that night, all the warriors set up camp and rested for the night. Tae-Kyung sits in front of a bonfire and sees a familiar face sitting across from him. He is confused by the fact that Jin is here, sitting across from him, before arriving at the battlefield instead of recovering in the infirmary. Jin explains that he is in peak condition and does not want to miss out on a battle that involves the name of their family. Fun fact, Jin was not discharged properly and managed to escape from the infirmary. Tae-Kyung tries to get him to go back by telling him that he appears fatigued, but Jin denies that statement by doing a funny display on how healthy he currently is. They then had a back-and-forth debate about Jin's actual current health condition. Tae-Kyung ends the debate by assigning Jin to assist the others in setting up the tents. But before he finishes his command, Jin begins to act injured and shrivels to the ground, which earns him a hilarious beating from Tae-Kyung. Wik-young walks up to the bickering duo and asks if Jin is all right. The two stopped bickering, and Jin quickly greeted him stiffly while Tae-Kyung greeted his brother formally. Wik-young then tells Jin to settle down since he looks like he isn't in great shape. He then puts his hand on the stiffened Jin's shoulder and assures him that his internals have completely healed. Wik-young then turns his attention to his little brother and invites him to join him on a walk. Moments later, the two brothers are walking in the middle of the woods by themselves under moonlight. Wik-young asks how Tae-Kyung's recovery is going, to which he replies that it's going well, especially by the fact that he finished distributing his status points and leveling up, which made him stronger. Tae-Kyung is assigned to rear guard duty, which means that he will only have to deal with a few warriors, which does not sit well with Tae-Kyung since he is not getting any more fame. He takes their alone time as an opportunity to ask his older brother for a mission. He comes up with an elaborate story that will give him the chance to gain more experience and fame. The elaborate story sends Wik-young into tears and praises his little brother. But Tae-Kyung is not doing this for noble reasons. He just wants to log out before the main battle begins. Unfortunately, Wik-young cannot accept Tae-Kyung's request. He appreciates the thought, but he tells Tae-Kyung to focus on the rear, which makes Tae-Kyung ask Wik-young to reconsider. Any further pleas from Tae-Kyung were denied by his older brother for the reason that he already has done enough great feats and is already assigned one of the most important duties for the family, which is to survive. This confuses Tae-Kyung, but Wik-young follows it up by saying that Tae-Kyung must do whatever he can in order to survive. Even if the main family is on the verge of destruction, he must flee as far as he can. If the root survives, then the tree will grow once more. He tells his little brother, as an older sibling and as the lesser head of the family, that Tae-Kyung and Muk-young are both capable of becoming greater figures than he could ever be. He reminds Tae-Kyung that that is his mission, as he pats his head before walking away deeper into the woods. The next morning, they began to traverse once more, and at their current speed, they should be able to arrive at Dingxing by tomorrow. The protector of the third gate, Kwak-jun, greets the currently confused Tae-Kyung, but is saddened by his reaction when he forgets about him. Who can honestly blame Tae-Kyung in his situation back then, where he was also greeting a large number of individuals when they first met? Tae-Kyung apologizes to Jun, and he is forgiven easily. Jun then expresses his disappointment when he hears that Tae-Kyung was assigned to the rearguard because not only does it diminish their chance of accomplishing a great deed, but it also reduces their chances of witnessing the Great Lord's Blade of Flower. The existence of the Blade of Flower is known throughout the mainland. Tae-Kyung realizes that the person he was talking about was Elder Baek-yang, and is surprised to hear that he was amazing. Baek-yang is a hero that was born during the times of the Great War of the Orthodox and Unorthodox, and he was known as an honorable warrior who would not tolerate any injustice. This does not match Tae-Kyung's first impression of the old man. Jun then goes into full fanboy mode and begins to ramble more about the elder's story as they traverse. After a few minutes of listening to Jun's fanboy rambling, he wonders how the heck Jun is not worried about the fact that they are going to war. Tae-Kyung then cuts off Jun's constant rambling by assuming that he is confident that they will win the war. Jun strongly replies, telling him that they will prevail before marching further ahead of Tae-Kyung. Guys, my gut feelings are telling me that this mofo is a huge red flag. Tae-Kyung is left speechless and jaw-dropped by Jun's statement, which makes him unable to quickly answer Mujin's question about Jun's identity. Tae-Kyung then tells him that Jun is just a guy who is a little too optimistic about everything. On the night of their second march, they managed to arrive at Heng Shui. Wikyung gathered all of the commanders for a meeting. He predicted that due to the dwindling food supplies of their enemies, he would point out 4 different routes. Among the 4 routes, they can take one of them in order to arrive at Dingxing. He came to the conclusion that they would take only one possible route and decided to position their troops at the 8 Spring Gorge. The entrance to the gorge is very narrow, shaped like a jar, and has very steep edges, so it is a good place to set up an ambush. Not to mention, with the help of the lower district sect's Wolhua, they were able to position about 100 archers on the cliff's edge beforehand. And at dawn, 300 warriors of the Jin family and 150 assisted warriors of the faction made their way to the gorge. Tae-Kyung watches from a nearby cliff as the warriors depart for the gorge, but he is a bit sad that it was the last time he got to see Wikyung and he didn't get to say goodbye properly. Tae-Kyung then sits down on a rock and stays there all night, watching them walk away. The next day, Tae-Kyung did not move from his spot, which made the other warriors worry about him. They began to approach them, and they were surprised by what they saw. A dried-up Tae-Kyung scares the other warriors, and the reason why Tae-Kyung is in his current state is because he was watching his fame points go up and waiting for their completion, but he is currently missing 3 more points that will allow him to go home. The others find Tae-Kyung crazy when they find him talking to himself, but they notice something beside him. They ask what it is, and Tae-Kyung explains the details of the divine palm of fire and the burning pill. He explains it so blandly and nonchalantly that the others essentially expressed their disbelief about the description by making funny faces, but Tae-Kyung tells them that he is not lying, and that he won't be needing it anytime soon. The others walk away in disbelief, and normally, Tae-Kyung would have slapped Mujin's face again, but since he is feeling nice, since it is the last time that he would be their group leader. Out of nowhere, Jun and his group, dressed in black attire, gathered everyone's attention by telling them that the war has begun and they plan on starting their own plans. This situation makes Tae-Kyung hypothesize that this situation is bad and that Jun has a completely different mission. Jun confirms Tae-Kyung's suspicions to be correct and tells everyone that they plan on killing everyone in the rear guard and regrouping with the main force. Everyone gets into battle formation, and the rearguard warriors express their hatred towards the people who have betrayed the main family. Tae-Kyung tells the others to stand back, but they are confused as to why, since they considered the protectors nothing more than second-rate warriors, but that cannot be any farther from the truth. Tae-Kyung tells the others that Jun and his group are not a bunch of weaklings, but all first-rate warriors. Tae-Kyung expresses his regrets for focusing on logging out too much, to the point where he was not aware of the possibility of betrayal, despite spending 4 days with them. Tae-Kyung receives the quest to eliminate Jun and his group of assassins, which he is in no position to decline. The assassins initiate their attack, which pushes Tae-Kyung quite a bit back, until he manages to outmaneuver them and land a combo counterattack. The originally overly confident Yoon gradually loses his confidence and becomes nervous when he sees his comrades die one after another by Tae-Kyung. But what confuses him the most about the situations is where Tae-Kyung is pulling out his arsenal of various weapons. But it was not just Tae-Kyung who surprised Jun. The other members are also putting up a fight by utilizing battle formations to kill their enemies. This is not a battle formation. These guys are just too much coward. Jun's side is gradually losing its chances to win this fight. The information that they had on them is completely wrong. They originally thought that Tae-Kyung was just a lucky guy, but they had to realize it the hard way when he proved that he was a Transcendence rank martial master. Jun plans on escaping the scene, but is quickly stopped by Tae-Kyung when he threatens him with the blade of his spear. Moments later, they tied Jun up and began to torture him for information. Tae-Kyung asks him once more about Jun's employers and the whereabouts of the real protectors of the third gate. Jun tries to spit onto Tae-Kyung's face, but misses his target by a mile. But the intention of annoying him was fulfilled, so he earned a relentless beating session gladly provided by Tae-Kyung. Jun tries to defend himself by saying that they really were the protectors of the third gate, but Mujin confirms that his testimony was false. He explains that the protectors of the third gate are a sect that was destroyed 30 years ago, and they are famous for taking in orphans in order to create martial warriors. Some of the members hypothesize that they might have killed the real protectors of the third gate and are pretending to be them. This makes Jun chuckle, and he explains that the protectors of the third gate were created for the sole purpose of serving that man, and this was the great plan that he's been preparing for over 30 years. Using the information, the only person who could fit that description would be head elder Baek-yang. He matches the description, but what is his motive? Tae-Kyung wonders. He then thinks back to all the important events relating to Baek-yang and realizes something. He then asks Mujin how many new recruits joined them for the battle, to which he responds with approximately 100 warriors. Then Tae-Kyung asks him about the number of warriors from the head elder, to which he responds that it comprises at least half of the main force. Everyone suddenly realizes what Tae-Kyung was thinking, that the head elder helped Wik-young unify the family just for this day, and he did that in order to gain everything from this one battle. His brother and the forces of the main family are in danger. Tae-Kyung then mobilizes everyone, but Jun tells them that it is too late. Jun smiles as black liquid oozes out of every possible hole in his face when he tells Tae-Kyung that the great plan has already begun. From today on, the province of Shaanxi will be greeted with a new master. He screams his final words before succumbing to the poison he consumed. The system then notifies Tae-Kyung that he has completed his quest. Not only did he level up from it, but he also got enough points of fame to fulfill the condition required for him to log out. He can finally go back home. He thinks about his family and reality, but he realizes that he cannot go back just yet. He apologizes to them and pleads for them to wait for him a bit longer as he picks up his spear and plans on saving his brother. Unfortunately for him, the system is forcefully logging him out of the game after 3 seconds. Tae-Kyung's vision slowly fades along with his consciousness as the timer runs out and the game logs him out of the Murim world. He is then greeted with darkness for a moment before removing his VR helmet. He begins to tremble for a bit before calling out to the system. He does not get any response from it and tries it again, but with his character profile this time. Once again, no response. Then he tries it with the other system options, but none of them respond to him. After a brief moment of silence, a clicking sound can be heard, and Tae-Kyung springs out of the device as he screams his joy at being back in reality. He tries to enjoy his return to reality, but is greeted with the sound of what caused this dilemma in the first place. Jinho's constant loud snoring was the reason why Tae-Kyung had to go through weeks of torturous training. Out of anger and frustration, he neck-chopped the sleeping Jinho and continued to hit the confused sleeper. Moments later, after discussing what Tae-Kyung had gone through while Jinho was asleep, he did not believe a word Tae-Kyung said. It confuses him by telling him that it has only been there for 3 hours, not to mention that the capsule he was in was an ancient piece of junk that probably belongs in a museum. Tae-Kyung himself is not sure about it either, but he is surprised to learn that 30 days in the game would be equivalent to 3 hours in reality. Jin-ho still finds his words to be impossible, which annoys Tae-Kyung so much that he shoves him inside the pod and slams the helmet on his head. He might as well try it for himself. Jin-ho does not want to, but looking at Tae-Kyung's irritated face makes him yield and give it a try. Tae-Kyung sends him off before closing the pod and setting a timer for 10 minutes. It has been 10 seconds in reality, which means that half a day should have passed inside the game already, and Tae-Kyung is already betting that Jin-ho is confused about the current situation. But out of nowhere, Jin-ho nonchalantly steps outside of the pod, which surprises Tae-Kyung. He questions him on how he managed to get out that quickly, and Jin-ho asks him how he is supposed to play when the pod is not even plugged in the first place. Jin-ho steps out of the room to get more sleep, but Tae-Kyung stands there in silence. This newfound information sends a chill into Tae-Kyung's body and begins to make him question. What was the game he was forced to play to begin with? He stares at the empty pod as he questions if everything he has gone through is just a dream. But he remembers everything clearly, so he cannot classify it as an illusion. He then remembers the user manual and quickly looks for it. He manages to find it and flips through the pages. He finds a new page where it says that the capsule is bound to the first user until their death. It also says that it has immense time manipulation in order to maximize playtime, and that a player will automatically become synced with the in-game character and will both experience a sense of unity. Tae-Kyung finishes reading the user manual, and it confirms all of his theories about the game. He then thinks about the time manipulation feature of the capsule. Will Mujin and the rest of his unit be able to safely deliver the news regarding the betrayal of the head elder to Wick-young? Will Wick-young be able to successfully defend the elder's attack? He calculates the in-game time by using reality's time, but stops midway because he thinks that they are doing fine without him, and continues to gather more information. He then studies the character synchronization system, but is confused by what it means when a player and a character are in sync with one another. He throws a mini torture before trying to call out to the system. It does not respond to him, and the frustration gets to Tae-Kyung so much that he gets noise complaints from his neighbors. Once the sun rose, he then went to every single store that specializes in selling VR capsule products and looked at all of the newest capsule models that were currently on the market. But there weren't any models that were the same as his. He also looked at ones that stated they had realistic graphics that were over 70% identical to the real world. But the NPC's movement and interaction with a player in the game were very rough and felt way too unnatural compared to his game. Not to mention, nobody seemed to know or hear about Murim Logan. Since he was not able to find anything on his own, he decided to take the user's manual and have Jin-ho look over it since he was a VR game enthusiast. In the end, even Jin-ho didn't seem to know anything about the company or the VR capsule model. But the most unbelievable thing was that Jin-ho was only able to view the first page and wasn't able to view any of the other pages. This means that Tae-Kyung is the only person who can see this piece of information, and that caused quite a dilemma for quite some time. Later that night, Tae-Kyung sits on a park bench as he calls his little sister. She picks up the phone and greets the caller, but Tae-Kyung was emotional to hear her voice after all this time. She becomes irritated that no one is answering back to her and plans on hanging up, but Tae-Kyung manages to snap out of it and responds to her. She asks him why he is calling her, to which he responds that he missed hearing her voice. This irritates her a bit, but Tae-Kyung calms her down by asking how their mother is doing. She tells him that she isn't back yet, and if he's curious about her, then why not call her himself? Tae-Kyung is already on the brink of shedding tears from hearing his sister's voice, so what more if it was his mother? In the real world, it's only been a day since he last saw his family. It makes him wonder what would have happened if he never came back. That does not matter to him right now, and what matters to him is that he has returned to his world and that he has a family that he needs to protect. He will consider his memories of his Murim days as a dream and focus on living his life in the real world. The next day, Jin-ho wakes up to see Tae-Kyung heading out to work. and the VR capsule is outside by the trash bins. He is glad that Tae-Kyung is moving on from his fantasies, but after a brief moment of silence, he did come to realize that Tae-Kyung was really adamant about the whole thing. This sparks his curiosity, and he plans on conducting his own research about the company and the capsule. Later on, we can see Tae-Kyung conversing with someone in a waiting room, and they reminisce about each other's past experiences as hunters. The man Tae-Kyung was talking to is named Mr. Rough Guy, but his real name is still unknown. He was the first hunter that he met when he started out. Tae-Kyung knows that he has been working as a hunter for a really long time, so it is a bit surprising that he is still working as one. Mr. Rough Guy then asks his former colleague what the name of the guild was that he worked for a while. It was the Picnic Guild, and Tae-Kyung was fired from that place yesterday in real time. Mr. Rough Guy is laughing hysterically and is glad that he is gone from that guild because it sounds stupid to him. As they converse, a loudspeaker announces that an E-rank hunter named Hyukyun must head to the main lobby. Mr. Rough Guy stands up and heads towards the designated area. This makes Tae-Kyung realize that Mr. Rough Guy and Hyukjun are the same person, but it surprises him to hear that he was an E-rank hunter. That means he worked his butt off to get to where he is today. He then realizes that everyone in the waiting room were E-rank hunters, and as more hunters were called to leave, it irritated Tae-Kyung as he waited for his turn. Then the loudspeaker announces his name this time and calls for him to head to the main lobby. He heads to the lobby, and a young man wearing a suit from the Peace Guild hands him a bunch of papers he needs to read and sign. Later on, we can see Tae-Kyung being introduced inside a black van to a few other men. Hyukjun is in the same van as him and tells him that they are all E-rank hunters and that they've known each other for over 10 years. Tae-Kyung thinks that his experience level is not at a novice level, but comparing it to the others, they are definitely veterans. He wonders why he sees Hyukjun more often than usual, and it was revealed that Tae-Kyung was recommended to the party by Hyukjun himself, but he was trying to hide that fact. Moments earlier, when the suited man gave Tae-Kyung a debrief about the plan, he explained that the gate is ranked E. Tae-Kyung's pay will be 30, and his adjusted pay will be 8-2. The Peace Guild will be taking 20%. Tae-Kyung will be handling their luggage during the raid. He realizes that no guild normally gives someone this amount of payment for a pack mule, so he turns to Hyukjun and thanks him for his consideration. Hyukjun tells him that it's nothing, for he only made a suggestion, and that the one who made the final decision himself was the suited man from earlier, whose name is revealed to be Choi. They arrive outside the gate, and they get ready for the raid. Gates are one of the few remnants left over by the Great Catastrophe, and these gates served as the invasion route taken by the Demon King Asmodeus about 30 years ago. But it quickly became a source of income for hunters and a place to gather high-energy resources, as magic gems found in gates allowed for such measures. Inside the gate, anything that is not powered by magic cannot be used, as it would quickly deteriorate and become useless. That is why hunters must use gear that was forged by magic gems, and because of this, their pay rises along with their expenses. Everyone gets geared up, and they were surprised by Tae-Kyung's gear. His gear looked beaten up and on the verge of breaking, which received harsh but true criticism from Hyuk-Young because he worries for Tae-Kyung's safety. Well, since he is assigned to luggage duty, his current armor should be fine for now, but he has to remain on guard. Raid leader Choi steps out in a complete Crimson Dragon set, which makes Tae-Kyung express his amazement at it. The group suddenly became quiet before Choi began to ramble about the details and effects of his gear, while striking multiple poses for the group. After Choi finishes up his fanboy rambling, a moment of silence fills the air before they enter the gate. Tae-Kyung asks Hyuk-Jung what is up with their leader, and he explains that Choi is obsessed with gears, so he gets into fanboy mode when someone notices his gear. And here, Tae-Kyung thought that Choi was the most normal person in the party. Tae-Kyung notices that their party is small in numbers, and asks Hyuk-Jung where the other guild members are, to which he replies by telling him that the Peace Guild is an extremely new guild, composed of 3 members, including the guild leader. This new information shocks Tae-Kyung, and makes him worry if they will be all right with doing the raid with these few numbers. but Hyuk-jung reassures him that Choi is a C-rank hunter. They enter the gate and cast a light spell that illuminates the dark cave. What lurks in the cave is a group of goblins that huddle up in a corner. The goblins take notice of the newly arrived hunters and initiate an attack on them as they unleash a battle cry. Choi still remains calm and tells everyone to get into formation. The range dealers initiate the raid by launching a flurry of arrows at the goblins. The attack takes out multiple goblins, but some of the arrows were blocked by shields used by goblins. Choi then tells the range dealers to move back and to move the tanks into the front guard. The goblins rush into the hunters, but they manage to block their incoming attacks and land some counters on the goblins. After the tanks took out some goblins, Choi told the tankers to step aside, for he would launch an attack this time. He dashes at great speed and slices through a bunch of goblins who get in his way. Tae-Kyung cannot help but feel amazed by Choi's performance and would compare him to a first-rate warrior if it were by Murim standards. Tae-Kyung then hears a noise coming from behind him and notices that it is a goblin cowering in fear. He grins sinisterly at the goblin and wants to test something out. Maybe his skills will work here in reality. He gets into his stance and goes to attack the cowering goblin, but before he gets to do anything, Choi throws his sword and decapitates the goblin. He tells Tae-Kyung to start collecting the loot from the goblins. Tae-Kyung was left speechless by what just happened, but he managed to come back to his senses and focus on his role. They begin to traverse deeper into the gate, and after every nook and cranny, there will be goblins awaiting the right moment to strike. However, the humans they were targeting were capable hunters who managed to kill off each wave of ambushes. After every ambush, Choi assigns Tae-Kyung to wrap things up and begin looting the corpses. They have been repeating this process over and over again for possibly hours now. Tae-Kyung's backpack is filled to the brim with the overwhelming amount of loot that the party has accumulated. Tae-Kyung's efforts have been praised by the team before they prepare to enter the boss's room. A large doorway stands ominously in front of the party, and what awaits them is an eerie voice. A goblin wearing a cultic robe mutters an unknown chant on top of an altar in the middle of the dark room. The hunters question whether the cultic goblin is meant to be the boss. The doorway opened a bit more, letting more light inside the room, and what was unveiled by the darkness was surprising to see. A large number of dead goblins lay dead and scattered all over the room. Something catches Choi's attention. A miasma begins to flow out of the corpses and gather on top of the cultic goblin. Choi realizes its intention and tells everyone to get out of the room quickly, but it is too late. The cultic goblin swung its staff and ended its chant. The staff began to glow brightly, and a flash of light began to reach the party. A dark energy flew above the party and landed on the doorway, causing it to trap the hunters inside by closing their way in. They tried to stop the doors from closing, but it was too late. They are now trapped with the cultic goblin. Choi then reveals his worries, for he tells everyone that the cultic goblin is a hobgoblin chief priest. And what's worse is that it is a C-rank rare monster. Naturally, everyone turns pale as they are surprised by the fact that a monster of that ranking is in a measly E-rank gate. Choi is not yet finished with his explanation. A monster slowly moves towards the hunters, and what is revealed is a large, barbaric monster wielding a spiked club. Choi reveals that it is a hobgoblin chief warrior, and that it is also a C-rank rare monster. A moment of tension filled the room, and everyone collectively agreed that they might be screwed. However, Choi explains that the fight might not be impossible to win. He strategizes a plan and relays it to the others. If they can kill the priest first, they might have some chance of survival. This newfound hope sparks a glint in everyone's eyes, but that glint of hope is short-lived when Choi tells them that they have to buy him time to kill the priest by keeping the warrior busy. Before anyone gets a second of disapproval, Choi turns his back and tells them to buy him 5 minutes. He casts haste and sprints towards the priest while everyone collectively cusses him out. Tae-Kyung begins to have a nervous breakdown internally as his body trembles in fear. He is going to fight a monster of higher rank than him for only $300, and he was only assigned as a luggage boy and not as a combatant. They get into formation as the warrior dashes in their direction. The archers begin to launch a large number of arrows infused with mana towards the warrior, but are blocked by a single swing from its club. Before the range dealers manage to send another wave of arrows, the warrior jumps high into the air and prepares for a slam attack. The party couldn't dodge the attack, and the warrior's impact sent a shockwave that launched a flurry of rocks that took out all the range dealers. But not even a second has passed before the warrior takes out one of the tanks with a single blow. Hyuk-jung and Tae-Kyung are the only ones standing in front of the fearsome warrior. Hyuk-jung then tells Tae-Kyung that he will buy time for Tae-Kyung and the others to escape to safety. Tae-Kyung follows his commands and goes for the others, but he cannot help but feel worried about Hyuk-jung. Hyuk-jung then casts a bunch of enhancement spells before activating a skill called supercharging. Hyuk-jung raises his shield and charges towards the warrior at great speeds, but is also taken out by a single blow from the warrior's club. Tae-Kyung begins to break down as he remembers what happened during his last raid, but it is up to him now to defeat the warrior. He gets into his battle stance and performs his one-strike ability, but it ends in a hilarious tragedy. The attack does nothing to the warrior, for it lacks the power needed to have an impact, unlike his Murim version of himself. The spear hits the buttocks of the warrior, but it does not go through, and the wooden spear begins to bend as if it were melting plastic. This makes Tae-Kyung gain the warrior's attention as he faints from his failure. The warrior swings his club once more, but before it touches Tae-Kyung, the system finally notifies him. This wakes up Tae-Kyung, and it says that the synchronization is complete and that the system has been transferred. Tae-Kyung gets back up and blocks the warrior's attack unscathed. Inside him, chi begins to build up and rapidly flows throughout his body. He manages to not only block the attack but also parry it. Chi emits out of Tae-Kyung's body as he activates his chi sense on the warrior. This situation makes Tae-Kyung tremble, but not from fear, but from excitement. The warrior roars and begins to send a flurry of blows towards Tae-Kyung, but he easily dodges the attacks with the help of his footwork technique. The warrior is frustrated at him and sends a powerful slam attack to Tae-Kyung, but even that was dodged easily. Tae-Kyung then proceeds to use his spear attacks to land multiple blows on the warrior's body. The first strike dismembered the warrior's arm, and the rest left a bunch of wounds on it. The warrior was so overwhelmed by Tae-Kyung's attacks that he was backed into a corner. Tae-Kyung expresses his disappointment when he did not even need to use his one-strike skill. He ends the fight by nonchalantly stabbing the warrior in the mouth and through the head. The system pings a notification, and the sound of the system makes Tae-Kyung grateful for its return because it saved his life. Choi calls out to him as he is confused by what just happened. Behind the two of them were both slain C-rank monsters. Choi asks for Tae-Kyung's identity, for it is impossible that a F-rank killed a C-rank. After the raid, the people who were in charge of the gates were thrown into an uproar. Only 4 E-rank hunters suffered injuries, but thankfully, they weren't in critical condition. Whenever an incident like this occurs, it is required by law that the government compensate any damages to gear, medical bills that had to be paid, and any raid rewards lost. In the background, we can see Tae-Kyung purposefully damaging his own armor with a smirk on his face, since the government will be compensating him with a new set of gears. If one were to combine everything that they earned from the raid, they could guarantee that they had made quite a profit. After the 4 injured hunters were transported to an ambulance, Choi was escorted to the Civil Service Department in order to give his report. In a different van, we can see Tae-Kyung testing the system's mechanics once more, and it really shows that it is back in use. But his character profile has changed. He does not have any points of fame, and his titles have been changed. The things that affected him in Murim have all disappeared. Well, then again, it is not like he is the son of a rich noble in reality, nor is he the sleeping dragon or whatnot. He then opens the quest menu, which reveals the betrayer quest. It explains that he has found out who the betrayer was, and he is told to regroup with the main forces and alert them of the betrayer. Lastly, he has to lead his people to victory. This means that the system is telling him to go back to Murim. He has a sudden realization that the fact that the system can exist in the real world might mean that Murim is not just a game. Before he can finish his deep realization, Choi peeps into the tinted window of the van and gives Tae-Kyung a jump scare. Choi hops into the van and tells him that he gave a quick report on what went down and that they should contact him within the next few days. He also notifies Tae-Kyung that he will be investigated as well, which he does not want to experience again. Tae-Kyung then asks if Choi fulfilled his request from earlier. We then get to see the aftermath of their battle, where Tae-Kyung is asking Choi to keep everything related to him confidential. He worries that the system will be permanent or temporary, so it is best if nothing gets leaked to the public. Choi then asks him to take a look at his fancy-looking watch. He reveals that it is made by N Company using a C-rank magic gem. It has also been enchanted with some defensive magic, so Choi can use it as a shield during emergency situations. Tae-Kyung is confused as to why the sudden lecture occurred, but accepts the explanation regardless. They then plan to grab some premium Korean steaks, which Tae-Kyung has never eaten before. Moments later, we can see Choi and Tae-Kyung discussing the matter over cooked steaks. Choi explains that he told the higher-ups that he was the one who subjugated both the rare monsters. Tae-Kyung expresses his gratitude as he munches on freshly cooked steak. Choi then drops a bomb onto Tae-Kyung by asking him if he wants to join his guild, which naturally surprises Tae-Kyung and makes him spit out fragments of lettuce out of his mouth. Moments later, Choi is left alone at the table, and the food has already been cleaned out. It's revealed that Tae-Kyung told him that he has something important to do and requires more time to think about the matter at hand. Suddenly, Choi's phone rings, and he quickly answers it. An unknown figure is asking Choi what he wants to know about Tae-Kyung. He responds by asking for everything, especially information that stands out. The caller then tells him that Tae-Kyung has quite a big case and reveals the basic information that we already heard. But out of that information, something stands out. This information also surprises Choi since he did not expect it. It is revealed that Tae-Kyung was the sole survivor of the Sandong District Gate incident. After that incident, he disappeared for about half a year and was interrogated by a lot of different inspectors. He recently returned to his guild about a year ago and has been running gates non-stop for that duration. He was fired about 4 days ago for the purpose of reorganizing the guild. The caller infers that the real reason he was fired was because of that incident. They just let him go after carefully avoiding the eyes of the inspectors. The caller bets that Tae-Kyung was a real burden to them. Choi then asks for a copy of all the information that was relayed before hanging up. He collects his thoughts and tries to find a feasible hypothesis from them. He comes up with 2 possibilities. Either he has been hiding his strength, or he has recently had another awakening, which sounds more feasible. He questions the possibility of one going from F rank to C rank that quickly, but his deep train of thought is cut off when he pays for their dinner bill. $1937 were the allotment of the bill that dropped Choi's jaw and turned his skin pale. Moments later, we can see Tae-Kyung frantically looking for something. He wonders who took his VR capsule that he dumped in the middle of the street. He screams his frustration loudly, which is hilariously responded to by Jin Ho. He makes a short comedy skit reference, which annoys Tae-Kyung so much that he yells at him louder than ever. Jin Ho calms down Tae-Kyung's anger by telling him that he really has the capsule, which turns Tae-Kyung's angry eyes into heart eyes, as he does a cutesy confession skit. Later that night, we can see Tae-Kyung lying down on his bed as he tries to collect his thoughts after everything that just happened. Earlier, back at the restaurant, Choi tells Tae-Kyung that he will be receiving $100,000 as a down payment, and they will be paying him additional to the amount as they would pay for C-rank hunters. Under normal circumstances, Tae-Kyung would have signed, stamped, sealed, and even left a kiss mark on the contract paper. But what if the system disappeared the next day? The world is a dangerous place for him to be placed in that situation. But what if the system was permanent and he got to keep his current strength? He couldn't hold himself back anymore and quickly rushed out of the room. Even though he worked really hard for the past 7 years, he could never escape the label of being an F-rank hunter. He wants to get rid of the shackles that bind him to the ground and hinder his development. He sprints as fast as he can as he looks for a taxi that will take him to the Hunters Association in the Buchan district. There he will be taking a hunter ranking reevaluation. The next day at the Hunters Association, A man praises his son for becoming a D-rank hunter and recruits his son into his own guild since he already removed all the low-ranking ones that annoyed him. While the father and son were conversing, a bunch of people began running to the evaluation room. Apparently, a C-rank hunter has made an appearance, and his ability to control mana is above an A rank, which catches the father's attention and activates his greed. Everyone waits for the star of the rumor to come down to the lobby. They wait in front of the elevator and become excited when it starts moving down. The father from earlier thinks that this might be a great chance to recruit someone strong. He checks around to see if there are any potential rivals that will get in his way. He doesn't see any, and since his guildmaster told him not to worry about the cost, he will offer him twice as much as anyone else. If he can successfully recruit this person into his guild, he can probably promote himself to become a vice guild master. The elevator reaches the lobby, and the father bows down into a perfect 90-degree angle and introduces himself as the captain of Sopung Guild, Kim Sang-shik. He then explains how their guild is considered a renowned guild, but the person he is talking to thinks otherwise. Sang-shik hears a familiar voice, and when he looks up, he is also greeted by a familiar face. It turns out the person they were waiting for is none other than Tae-Kyung, who looks down on the desperate Sang-shik. Sang-shik was Tae-Kyung's former boss. He was one of the 3 D-rank hunters in the guild, and he only cared about protecting his own life inside the gate. He was your typical petty man who would bully the weak. Since he was the team captain, he would always pick on the F-rank hunters, and out of the hunters, he hated Tae-Kyung the most. 2 years ago, after the incident that happened in Sangdong district, he would talk behind Tae-Kyung's back while pretending to worry about him. The one who advised the guildmaster to fire him was none other than him, and this man was also the one who personally notified Tae-Kyung of his dismissal. Back to the present, Sang-shik questions Tae-Kyung on why he was the one who got off the elevator. Tae-Kyung then tells everyone to get out of his way and plans to head out while ignoring their pleas for him to join their guild. The fact that Tae-Kyung humbled the petty and egotistical Sang-shik made him feel like 10 years' worth of poop got flushed out of him. The recruiters have become more persistent with their pleading, but they have all been turned down by Tae-Kyung. Later, outside the building, Tae-Kyung can be seen tossing out all of the business cards that he received from the recruiters. And not even a minute has passed since one of the recruiters chased after Tae-Kyung to redeem themselves. It was Sang-shik, and he begins to talk formally as he pleads for Tae-Kyung's forgiveness while breathing heavily after running. He then says that he will take full responsibility for everything and hopes that he will let bygones be bygones. He explains that if Tae-Kyung does not join a big guild, it pretty much means that his career as a hunter will end. Tae-Kyung already knows about this information, but Sang-shik still tries to shamelessly recruit Tae-Kyung to the point where it can be considered pathetic. Sang-shik is obviously panicking at this point. The F-rank hunter he told him to get rid of has reawakened into a C-rank hunter. If the guildmaster hears about that news, Sang-shik will be in definite trouble. Tae-Kyung signals for a taxi, but Sang-shik tries to make a last-ditch effort by blocking his way inside and continuing to beg. Tae-Kyung has had enough of it and tells him that if he really wants to recruit Tae-Kyung, he will have to make sure a certain message reaches the guildmaster. There is one person he does not want to see when he joins them, and that person is Sang-shik. If he can get rid of that one person, Tae-Kyung will consider joining their side. Sang-shik finally snaps and tries to land a punch on Tae-Kyung's face so he can relieve his frustrations, but naturally he gets counterattacked and is sent flying. Tae-Kyung takes a seat in the taxi and asks for the driver to take him to the Hope Guild headquarters in Songnai district. Funny fact, by the way. The taxi driver was the same driver who refused to drive him the night before, for the reason that he can only operate in the Seoul metro area. Tae-Kyung quickly gets out of the taxi and slams the door as he wonders why Seoul metro taxis function outside their jurisdiction. Moments later, we can see tropical rainforest scenery, and deep inside the forest is where a gate rests. Then 2 people donning armor step out of the gate, and it is revealed to be Tae-Kyung and Choi. Choi donning his new armor set and spear while panicking about the fact that he ended up coming with Choi. A few hours before, we could see Tae-Kyung meditating and gathering chi on his bed, when all of a sudden a system notification popped up. It tells him that his hangover has subsided, and it is revealed that the Peace Guild sent over $10,000 via online deposit, and with that money, Tae-Kyung went all out to celebrate. He bought a bunch of meat and alcohol and had a party with Jinho last night. The system then notifies him that his chi meditation has been completed and that a small amount of turbid chi has been dispelled. Tae-Kyung wonders why the chi he is able to gather is so small, not to mention that he has some turbid chi. It is completely different from when he used it in the Murim world, and he then wonders if it is caused by the environmental pollution in reality. As Tae-Kyung continues to wonder, his phone vibrates on his desk and notifies him that someone has messaged him. The message entails that the sender wonders if Tae-Kyung has some free time that day. Moments later, we can see Choi and Tae-Kyung sitting across from each other in a cafe. They discuss Tae-Kyung's recruitment over coffee, and Tae-Kyung insists that it is difficult for him to join a new guild immediately. Choi couldn't do anything about that, so he pulled out an alternative offer. He takes out an envelope from his blazer and hands it over to Tae-Kyung. The contents of the envelope were a temporary contract, which is the equivalent of hiring Tae-Kyung as a mercenary. Choi explains that it is not an official contract, and the conditions of the contract are similar to those of a B-rank hunter. He follows it up by saying that Tae-Kyung can decide on the length of the contract as well. With all that effort, Choi asks if Tae-Kyung will be refusing this deal as well. Tae-Kyung hesitates for a moment before asking Choi the reason why he is going this far for someone like Tae-Kyung. Choi does not hesitate to answer that question by saying that he trusts himself. He trusts his intuition and ability to determine the value of a person, and that is why he really wants someone like Tae-Kyung to join his guild. Choi then asks Tae-Kyung once more, and this time, Tae-Kyung agrees to sign the contract. Tae-Kyung sets the duration of the contract to last for a week, which should be enough for him to see if the system is a temporary thing or not. He then asks Choi if he should show up to work tomorrow, and Choi doesn't waste a second to answer no because they will be starting now. Now, back to the present. Inside the rainforest gate, we can see Choi and Tae-Kyung inspecting their surroundings. They are currently inside a D-rank gate, and the size of the gate is normally larger than any gates of lower ranking. Choi then pulls out a map that was given to them when they bought the rights to the gate, so they shouldn't be worried about getting lost. Tae-Kyung then asks Choi what he meant when he said that he bought the rights to the gate. Choi tells him that it is what it sounds like, that the gate is now officially his, and that he has sole ownership of the gate, which surprises Tae-Kyung. Tae-Kyung recollects some information about the gates and explains that in South Korea, the gates are the property of the nation. Since these gates have the ability to provide unlimited amounts of energy from magic gems, they are pretty much considered the same as a diamond mine. He already knew that Choi was the son of a rich family, but he did not think that he would be this well off to the point that he bought a gate for himself. The light of richness flashes in Tae-Kyung's eyes and blinds him. They proceed to traverse deeper into the forest, and as they move forward, Choi explains that the monsters that appear at the gate are the swamp lizard men. They are a large tribe that breaks off into smaller militaristic forces. Since they are currently at the entrance, they will start to see the smaller and weaker forces first. Lizard men usually come in groups of 20, so Choi advises Tae-Kyung to hurry and kill them before moving on. Tae-Kyung begins to worry about the fact that Choi is looking down on a D-rank gate a little excessively. For Tae-Kyung, the swamp lizard men are not known to be weak monsters, which makes him think that Choi might be confident in his own abilities. Earlier, back in the cafe, we could see Tae-Kyung freaking out when Choi told him the details of the mission and that it would only be the two of them going in the gate. It freaks Tae-Kyung out so much to the point that he might resign the contract, but before he does anything rash, Choi understands how he feels about it too. However, what Choi said next surprised Tae-Kyung. He explains that he too is a reawakened hunter, which naturally surprises Tae-Kyung since he knows that Choi is a C-rank hunter. But that rank is outdated. Choi then mentions that he receives his reawakening after that, which means that he is at least B rank or higher. Back to the present, we can see Tae-Kyung activating his chi sense so he can see just how strong Choi currently is. But before he does anything, a harpoon lands in front of Tae-Kyung. Choi then explains that the lizard men usually use a harpoon as their weapon, so he asks Tae-Kyung to be careful, but it might be a bit too late for that. Standing and watching above a cliff in front of the duo of hunters, level 40 lizard men donning revealing armor grabbed the attention of the human hunters, and they have yet to initiate their attack. A flurry of harpoons flies towards Tae-Kyung with the intention of killing him, but he manages to block the attack easily. A lizard man then drops down from the cliff and initiates a solo attack on the two hunters. Choi explains that the lizard men's characteristic is to fight head-on, proving that they are rash creatures. The lizard man chooses Tae-Kyung as its target and slashes him with its harpoon. Tae-Kyung barely reacted in time, but he managed to block the attack with his new spear. He wonders why the heck the lizard man is only attacking him and not Choi. Choi then explains that the reason for that is Tae-Kyung's gear, which includes the lizard men hunting leather set and the lizard men massacre harpoon. Their names alone make Tae-Kyung realize the reason for the lizard man's anger. At this rate, he might be the only one collecting the lizard's attention, which gives him the sudden realization that Choi must have done this on purpose. He calls out to Choi and exposes him for using him as bait while he kills the unaware lizard men. A moment of tension filled the area as the lizard men began approaching the hunters. That tension ceased to exist when Choi gave Tae-Kyung a reality check. He points out the fact that before they entered the gate, the gear Tae-Kyung currently has equipped was all chosen by Tae-Kyung himself. And secondly, regardless of what happened, Choi states that he will not be making a single move during the raid, so he asks Tae-Kyung not to misunderstand. Tae-Kyung is suddenly confused by what Choi just said and asks for clarification. Before Tae-Kyung gets another profane word out of his mouth, another harpoon almost lands a blow to his head. He manages to block the attack, but is now on the defensive since he has to fight a group of lizard men by himself. Tae-Kyung then asks Choi for what reason he is doing this, but before he finishes his sentence, Choi has disappeared. Tae-Kyung looks for him and finds him sitting on a tree branch, cheering for his victory. He cusses him out before another wave of harpoon attacks are blocked by Tae-Kyung once more. He is seriously becoming more annoyed as the fight goes on and gets into a battle stance. He then initiates his spear techniques, and well, lizard blood has been shed so much that the system window pops in. It states that the lizard men items that Tae-Kyung currently has equipped have had their status effects applied for a total of 30% additional damage. It also notifies him that he has single-handedly taken care of the lizard men in the surrounding area, and it tells him to make sure to stay on guard, as these monsters will not stop to fulfill their vengeance. Moments later, a lizard man passes away from the damage it sustained, as Tae-Kyung stands in the center of a massacre. The system notifies him that he has defeated another lizard man and that he has leveled up a couple of times. Choi finally jumps off his tree branch and approaches Tae-Kyung from behind. Before Tae-Kyung gets to cuss out the man who has left him to fend for himself, Choi apologizes for his actions. He needed to confirm Tae-Kyung's skills. He needed to know how Tae-Kyung moved and how many opponents he could take on, and he also needed to figure out how far he could take Tae-Kyung with him. Regardless of Choi's intentions, he still should not have just left Tae-Kyung to fight all of those monsters by himself. Choi defends himself by saying that he was confident that he would be able to take care of them on his own, but he never expected Tae-Kyung to take care of them without suffering a single scratch. Something then sparks inside Tae-Kyung's brain as he clears his throat. He begins to act cheeky based on what Choi just said and smirks at his tester. He then asks what Choi's verdict was, but his response is very vague, for he isn't sure what he thinks yet. So he pulls out a canister from his pocket, and a red mist begins to flow out of it. Choi tells the confused Tae-Kyung that the mist was pheromones that were harvested from female lizard men. This makes Tae-Kyung realize something horrific. The ground begins to shake, and a loud noise is coming from the forest. The source of the noise is coming towards them. Choi smiles and tells the frustrated Tae-Kyung that the effects of the pheromones are quite strong. That was proven to be true when a huge wave of lizard men began to flow out of the forest. Choi asks the worried Tae-Kyung if he can manage to take down the wave by himself. He responds by asking if he cannot manage, Choi will be there to help him, which he quickly declines. Behind the wave of lizard men, in the core of the wave, stands a huge lizard man, and it roars at the humans. The system reveals that the monster is a chief lizard man, and that the roar just now was his battle cry skill. Choi creeps up behind the pale Tae-Kyung and whispers that he could always retreat. But Tae-Kyung's nervousness disappears as he begins to approach the upcoming wave of monsters. He then opens his character menu, and it reveals that Tae-Kyung is now level 40, and that he still has 100 available skill points. He assigns 30 to his strength and stamina, then adds the remaining 40 to his agility. He then feels the effects of the distribution of points, and the wave of monsters is now nearing him. Choi focuses as he gets into his battle stance before activating his ultimate skill, One Strike. He activates it, and the attack sends out a beam of light that pierces everyone with a force comparable to a powerful railgun. Tae-Kyung's spear attack pierced through the wave of lizardmen so easily that it took out the entire wave with the use of only one single attack. Choi can only watch in disbelief as lizardmen's body parts rain down to the ground, and in the center of it all was a newly reawakened C-rank hunter. The rare monster he took down when they went to the previous E-rank gate needed the power of 2 C-rank hunters. However, the strength that Tae-Kyung just displayed would be unbelievable if he were only considered a C-rank. Choi only decided to launch this 2-man raid because he wanted to see Tae-Kyung's limits, but now he is only left with more questions than answers. He might be able to get the answer he needs when they go to a C-rank gate next time. Choi then suddenly went pale when he realized that there was also the possibility that Tae-Kyung might be stronger than himself. Out of nowhere, Tae-Kyung suddenly screams no, and not in the sense that a tragic accident happened. Well, maybe for him it was. His last attack was so powerful for him that he realized it too late when he saw the corpses. There were some rare monsters in the monster wave, and since his attack wiped them all out, he also wiped out all the precious materials that could have made him richer than ever. After watching Tae-Kyung's cries of anguish for his lost materials, Choi disregards his own worries and refuses to believe that Tae-Kyung is stronger than him. They both leave the gate moments later. Later that night, Tae-Kyung and Choi are changing back into their civilian attire, while Choi's personal butler assists them. Tae-Kyung asks what time he has to come tomorrow, which confuses Choi for some reason. Choi asks him if he thought that they were going to work on the weekend. Tae-Kyung thought that it was normal to work on the weekends as well, so he responded to him with that thought process. Choi is super surprised at what he is hearing. His reaction can be compared to learning about a revolutionary invention. Choi pulls himself together and explains that the purpose of the weekend is to rest, and that the law requires hunters to follow that purpose. He then wonders if Tae-Kyung's previous guild forced him to work on the weekends as well. Tae-Kyung nonchalantly dismisses that kind of reasoning. He explains that there are not many mid-tier guilds that follow that rule. They let them go on those raids by adding more to their wages, and since they do not want these raids to be left on their records, they are normally paid with cash. Choi then rebuts Tae-Kyung's reason because he is now officially a C-rank hunter, so there is no need for him to live his life like that. Tae-Kyung still tries to persuade Choi into letting him do it, so he can get a lot more done since he does not know if the system will disappear or not. Choi ends the discussion with one final rebuttal by explaining that Tae-Kyung will only tire himself out and that he has to take his family into consideration. This makes Tae-Kyung realize that he has only been able to talk to them over the phone. He hasn't had the chance to visit them for a few months now, including his time in the Murim world. Choi reminds Tae-Kyung that their guild, the Peace Guild, upholds the hunter's law, and that is also stated in Tae-Kyung's temporary contract. So firmly reminds him that he doesn't do anything else but rest during this weekend. Otherwise, he will be breaking the contract. Tae-Kyung couldn't think of another rebuttal, so he had no choice but to agree with his leader. This makes him think that Choi was a decent man, but that was before he remembered the fact that he made him run 3 C-rank gates in one day. The things Choi made him go through make Tae-Kyung's blood boil, which infers that Choi is making him rest during the weekend because he wants to repeat his abuse next week. He feels bad for the butler as well since he is unable to depart, even though it's pretty late. The butler pulls out a briefcase and hands it over to Tae-Kyung. The weight of the briefcase was so heavy that even Tae-Kyung was struggling to carry it. Choi explains that the contents of the case are Tae-Kyung's weekly payment. He says that he put in a little bit more than what the contract stated. He also included the total balance in there, so he tells Tae-Kyung to make sure to check it for himself. Choi and his butler then get in their van and depart. Tae-Kyung then pauses for a moment before looking around to see if the area is clear from onlookers. He then places the heavy case on a bench and opens it, which reveals a large number of Korean won bills. Inside the case was also a piece of paper that contained the balance statement. During this entire process, Tae-Kyung is trembling and dripping sweat for all kinds of reasons. The balance statement states that the amount of money inside the case would be equivalent to $30,000, but Tae-Kyung can clearly see that it is more than that number. He then remembers that Choi said that he would be adding a little extra, and that amount can be seen on the bottom of the statement papers. The bonus would amount to $270,000, bringing the total amount of money contained in the case to $300,000. Tae-Kyung then quickly takes back any curse statements he made to Choi and starts to treat him like a godlike figure. Money symbols pop out of Tae-Kyung's eyes as he states that he will offer his entire body for the Peace Guild. Moments later, we can see Tae-Kyung getting off an elevator and standing in front of a door with 1201 on the plate. He then inputs the security code of the door and unlocks it. As he opens the door, he is greeted by his mother and sister, and he is so glad to see them that he gives them a very warm smile in return. They sit down at the dining room table, and Tae-Kyung shares his stories as an adventurer. He then reveals the contents of his backpack to be the money he got from Choi, which naturally surprises them. He then pulls out his new Hunter ID, and on it is his new C-rank title. Like her older brother, money symbols pop out of Tae-Kyung's sister, who gets excited for this opportunity. She drags her family all over the mall to shop for new items, and later on, they are eating in a luxurious restaurant while wearing formal attire. Seeing the family together after a long time makes Tae-Kyung's mom so happy and gives her a gentle smile for this newly found memory. Moments later, we are greeted by a dark fog, and someone is calling out to Tae-Kyung repeatedly. It was his sister calling out to Tae-Kyung, and he can be seen sweating buckets on his bed. The system notifies him that his sleep mode has ended, but for some reason, Tae-Kyung is breathing heavily as his skin turns pale. Tae-Kyung's sister is worried for her brother since he seems to have woken up from a nightmare. He slowly gets out of bed and tries to remember what he was dreaming about. He cannot remember the contents of the dream, but there are some unknown negative feelings that he cannot simply shake off. Usually when he sleeps, the system does a good job of adjusting his body's condition, but this is the first time he has experienced something like this. His sister then worries about him and says that if there is something troubling him, he should let them know. She tells him to stop shouldering all of the burden by himself, to the point that even their mother is worried about him. He responds with a funny joke that led them into starting your average sibling bickering. Tae-Kyung then tells his sister that there is nothing much for him to worry about. He's pretty much got all of their living expenses covered. But there is one thing that he is suddenly worried about. How are they going to spend all of their money from now on? So Tae-Kyung then tells his sister that there is nothing to worry about and to just focus on her studies. She calls him out for his bluff before turning around and telling him that she is also doing well, so he doesn't need to worry about her. But what she said next really surprised him. She asks him who Jin Tae-Kyung is, and this question turns Tae-Kyung's skin pale. A few days have passed, and we can see Tae-Kyung doing another gate run with Choi. He is currently fighting another wave of lizard men by himself again, but this time some of the attacks land on him. He takes out all of the lizard men, but Choi points out that Tae-Kyung got hit 3 times. He tells his leader that he can easily take care of his wounds by drinking a low-rank potion. Choi states that Tae-Kyung in this situation are not fine at all. He explains that the gate they are currently at is the same gate as the one they ran last time. He didn't suffer a single injury back then. That means that there is only one possible explanation for this, and he then asks if there was something bothering him. We then jump forward 3 days, and Tae-Kyung is still fighting the lizard men at the same gate. He just finished his fight, and now he is tired and covered in cuts. Choi doesn't like what he sees and sends Tae-Kyung home, but he will contact him later on. Moments later, we can see Tae-Kyung contemplating and wondering what was wrong with him as he takes a bus ride home. The system hasn't disappeared, and he already has a lot of money, so what was wrong with him? All he needs to focus on are his duties as a C-rank hunter and nothing else. We then jump back in time to when Tae-Kyung's little sister asked him who Wick-young was. Tae-Kyung asks her where she heard of that name, to which she responds by saying that she heard him yell his name over and over while he slept. She then asks who Wick-young is to her brother, and she infers that he must be a close person to him since he kept calling to him in his sleep. And not to mention, their names are pretty similar. Back to the present, Tae-Kyung breaks down as he tries to think of the answer to all of his current problems. Ever since that day, the nightmares wouldn't end, and no matter how many times he used his chi circulation, he couldn't seem to make himself focus. An image of Wick-young then pops into his mind, making him wonder why he cannot stop thinking about him. He is so worried and confused that he even considered going to a psychologist. Later on, Tae-Kyung gets back to his apartment, but what waits for him inside surprises him. He opens the door to see Jin-ho working on the VR capsule with a toolbox beside him. The two men stare at each other for a long minute before Tae-Kyung runs to Jin-ho and lands a jump kick in his face. He then asks Jin-ho what he is doing with his capsule, to which Jin-ho responds by saying that he hasn't done anything to it and just got it back himself. He then kicks Jin-ho out of his room, and while he does that, Jin-ho asks why Tae-Kyung got so worked up about a trashy capsule that doesn't even work. Tae-Kyung threw it away on the streets to begin with. Tae-Kyung rebuts by saying that was before, but now he doesn't want anyone touching it. Jin-ho then screams his frustrations out to Tae-Kyung since he has to deal with the neighbors' complaints about him screaming at night. He then asks who Wick-young was, which turns Tae-Kyung's skin pale. After he reacts, Jin-ho begins to tease Tae-Kyung and assumes Wick-young is a girl that he likes, but this irritates the pale Tae-Kyung so much that he finally kicks him out. Moments later, we can see a vague image of an upcoming battle in the Murim world. Two sides with both of their respective flags raised in the middle of a valley. Weapons are drawn on all the warriors, and they stand in silence as tension builds up. A scream from one of the soldiers initiates the battle, and both sides charge at each other with the intent to kill. Sparks fly as metal weapons clash with one another, and from a cliff high above the battlefield, we can see a group of men watching them. It's Wick-young and his faction watching over the battle, and a familiar face is blurred out, but it is most certainly the head elder. We then zoom into his face, which reveals an ominous smirk that sends Tae-Kyung waking up from another nightmare. Tae-Kyung wakes up in his room sweating buckets as he notices the nightmares are becoming more vivid. He then screams his frustrations to the world. He screams that he doesn't care about them anymore. So what if that Murim world is an actual world itself? There are going to be over 2,000 Murim warriors fighting, so what the heck do they want him to do about it? There are going to be monsters who are far stronger than Jopil. Do they want Tae-Kyung to die fighting those people? He only lived in that world for a month, and the life that he has to live is here in reality. And there is nothing Wick-young can do now since Mujin will probably deliver the message regarding the betrayal of the head elder. And that is something they'll have to figure out for themselves. He then suddenly remembers the words and faces of all the people who either helped him or cared about him in the Murim world, which now makes him feel bad. Then, out of nowhere, his cell phone begins to vibrate beside him, and it turns out that Choi is calling him. Moments later, we can see Choi flipping through a bunch of papers, and it turns out that the papers contained information about Tae-Kyung. He finishes reading and asks the butler beside him for his thoughts. The butler tells his master that Tae-Kyung is clean. He is not an abnormally reawakened being, and he did not approach Choi with ulterior motives. Choi then asks if all of his behavior so far has been mere coincidence. He then asks his butler if he knew about the probabilities of having another awakening, to which the butler responds that they are roughly 1%. Choi corrects him by saying that it is actually 1 out of 100 people. Not to mention, being a hunter is already an extremely low probability. He then asks his butler what he thinks is the probability of a F-rank hunter reawakening into a C-rank hunter. What about the possibilities of a C-rank hunter being able to solo clear a C-rank gate? The butler shares his thoughts by saying that it isn't possible and that he would at least have to be a B rank. Choi then corrects his butler, telling him that Tae-Kyung was able to do it. 5 D-rank gates and 15 C-rank gates total up to 20 raids. Choi was only there to observe him from a distance during those raids and did not even have to help him at all. The butler then asks if he should look into the matter once more, but Choi doesn't let him and plans to continue observing Tae-Kyung's actions. The butler then smiles warmly and points out that Choi really plans on recruiting Tae-Kyung into the guild. Choi confirms the butler's observation to be correct, but once Tae-Kyung becomes suspicious, only then will Choi look into his background. If that doesn't happen, then he will make him one of his own men, no matter how long it takes. He then notices Tae-Kyung enter the room and plans on starting a business. A few minutes later, after talking for a bit, something surprises Tae-Kyung. A down payment of $500,000 and a fixed salary of $50,000 with a 70% increase every year. He will also be receiving one of the highest insurance policies, a 40-floor studio, and his own personal car as well. The conditions of the contract are even better than last time, and with this, he will be able to have it all. He then thinks of the benefits he will receive and how the effort he put into becoming a hunter for 7 years is finally paying off. Choi then asks if Tae-Kyung resolved his worries, to which he responds by telling him that he did. He then asks if he is sure, but Tae-Kyung can only force a smile before signing the contract. He flips and signs through the pages before reaching the last page. If he signs the contract, he can finally live his life in peace and comfort. He will be able to end the terrible life that he used to live, and he can finally say goodbye to the Murim world. As he signs the last page of the contract, the tip of his signature pen shatters into a bunch of pieces, and ink begins to spill on top of the contract. This makes Choi ask Tae-Kyung once more if he really resolved the problems he had last time. This time, he couldn't deny it. Choi then offered his assistance but was rejected by Tae-Kyung when he said that he needed to conquer it by himself. After hearing Tae-Kyung's words, Choi cannot help but feel defeated after being rejected not once but 3 times by him. He then asks Tae-Kyung when they should hold their 4th contractual meeting, and Tae-Kyung responds that he should be available by tomorrow at the same place. Choi asks if he is sure of what he is saying, and Tae-Kyung reassures him that he is, since Choi has no idea how long a day in reality can be equivalent to Murim's time. Tae-Kyung gets up and is fully determined to do whatever it takes to survive and come back to reality. Before he leaves, he has one more thing to say to Choi. He then says that there is a chance that he might have to increase his conditions tomorrow. He then leaves Choi's office, and later on, we are back in the Murim world, and we can see Mujin and his squad running up the snowy mountain. Tae-Kyung's Murim body is still unconscious and is currently being carried by Mujin as they run as fast as they can. All of them are visibly tired, and Mujin is starting to lose his mind. After everything that has happened since the declaration of the war and the betrayal by the head elder, all of that would drive anyone nuts. So out of all the times, why did Tae-Kyung faint right now? Tae-Kyung's unconscious body is definitely still breathing, but it feels like he is on the verge of death. The injury that Mujin suffered from Jopil is getting worse, and if he knew this would happen, he wouldn't have left the infirmary. He begins to turn even more pale as he begins to regret his decisions. They need to hurry and tell the main force about the betrayal of the head elder, but Mujin's body cannot push any further. Suddenly, a flash of light shone upon Mujin's eyes, revealing what appeared to be Buddha, sending his reassurance to the struggling warrior. The Buddha figure is most likely a figment of Mujin's imagination, and somehow it is persuading him to give up. He almost gives in to the imaginary Buddha's words, but a guy who is supposed to be their leader collapsed during a crucial moment, and the guys who are supposed to be his teammates aren't even offering to help Mujin carry their leader. Mujin then stops running as he begins to give up. But before he does anything, he suddenly feels a gust of warm air brush his ear. He turns around to see Tae-Kyung finally awake and greets his subordinate in a comedic fashion. On the other side, blades clash and sparks fly along with blood as the sounds of screams echo throughout the battlefield. Warriors of both sides begin to lose their limbs, and some lose their lives as the war progresses. From a cliff high above the battlefield, we can see the higher-ups watching the ongoing war. We then peek inside the mind of the head elder as he enjoys what he sees. His vision is finally coming through. The 8th Valley of the Heavens is the place where his grand plan will be revealed. When the great faction war happened many years ago in this narrow valley, in order to earn the title Legend, numerous martial warriors died there. He then calls out to Wick Young and asks him about his thoughts on the current situation. He says that the tide is in their favor, but when he looks over to the battlefield, he then adds that they are also suffering quite a bit of casualties on their side. The head elder then tells Wick Young that an important duty as the leader of an army is to know when he or she should join the fray or not. As the battle continues, the enemies will start to become more impatient, so he must make sure not to make any rash decisions. Wick Young then accepts the head elder's advice and tells him that he will have to hold back until the main force of the Mount Heng sword sect arrives. However, he finds it unfortunate that they cannot make use of their position, so he cannot help but be angry at the heavens. The head elder can agree with anyone that Wick Young is someone who can lead the main family well. Not only does he possess an immense amount of martial arts, but he is also well received by the people, and he is a young man who already possesses critical decision-making skills. So he finds it pitiful that Wick Young's potential will be lost when the plan is over. Back in the snowy forest, Tae-Kyung finally greets his surprised teammates, and naturally they ask him what happened. He has been unconscious for nearly a couple of hours. Since 1 month in Murim was about 3 hours in real life, and he was in the real world for about 2 weeks, this confirms the computation of the time scaling. He then asks everyone if he was breathing at least, but this confuses everyone and makes them ask why he is asking these questions all of a sudden. He then demanded answers, which told him that he was breathing and that if he wasn't, he would have been dead by now. This means that if Tae-Kyung enters one world, his body in the other world pretty much faints. If he hadn't taken care of those assassins earlier, then it's possible that he wouldn't even have a body to return to. He then asks about the main force's current situation, to which everyone answers that they are just making their way to them and that it will take a few more hours. Jin then hesitates to tell his leader that they might have to prepare for the worst. Tae-Kyung is confused by what Jin just said. If everything goes as Kwak Jun mentioned, this betrayal was something that had been properly planned for a long time. However, this plan of betrayal has one crucial flaw, and that is Tae-Kyung's existence and the fact that he survived. Not only that, Kwak Jun said something else during his interrogation. They wasted a little bit of time since they were questioning him, but it is still not too late, so there is no need for them to prepare for the worst. Placing his fist on his chest, Tae-Kyung declares that he will do whatever he can to make sure that doesn't happen. This warms the unit's cold bodies as Tae-Kyung gives a gentle smile, which makes hope shine in Jin's eyes. That hope quickly disappears when Tae-Kyung commands everyone to get ready to leave. Tae-Kyung asks everyone if he stuttered and stands firm with what he said, and so with that, everyone started to run. Back on the battlefield, the warriors of the main force are leading a massacre against the warriors of the Mount Heng sword sect. Mercenaries from the Reign of Blood clan attempted to retreat, but not only were they cut off by someone, but their commander was swiftly decapitated by the same person. The person in question is none other than the Mount Heng sword sect head, Cheonbaek. He threatens the rest of the Reign of Blood clan to head back into battle by telling them that their refusal will lead them to experience the true meaning of their clan name. He points his sword at the cowards and they begin to run back onto the battlefield. He is annoyed by the incompetence of the mercenaries that he hired for this war. He then begins to regret his own faults. He says that he was too impatient because he was blinded by his desire for revenge due to the death of his son. He ignored the words of his advisors and took the quickest route to get to where they were. He finds it embarrassing that he, of all people, would willingly walk into this narrow valley. Out of nowhere, a dark miasma begins to form and wrap Cheonbaek's blade as he takes a deep step forward. He begins to lead the vanguard into battle with a large number of warriors to kill the members of the Jin family. The head elder of the Jin family looks down again at the battlefield, but this time something catches his interest. There are some new faces that have been rapidly taking down their numbers, and the head of the opposing team finally appears in the fight. Wik-young says that the time has finally come, and the head elder agrees with him. The head elder thinks that it would have been better if a certain man showed up a bit later, but he guesses that it doesn't matter in the end, since a certain group will most likely step in. He then tells Wik-young that he will take care of Cheonbaek, which Wik-young permits. The Bloodhound, Lee Cheonbaek, is a transcendent martial master who single-handedly led the Mount Heng sword sect to the top. Wik-young finds the current circumstances unfortunate because he has always wanted to have a talk with him. He then calls for Wei-ping and tells him that they will take care of the rest. Wei-ping obliges and hands his master his sword. The sword he is currently holding is his father's sword, which he left behind when he was sent off to travel the mainland. Wik-young doesn't even know where the person who is supposed to be their family head currently is, and his second brother should have received news regarding their situation right now. Wik-young determines himself as the protector of the Jin family of Taiyuan, and he will have to emerge victorious. He then unsheathes his sword and raises it in front of his army, telling them not to leave a single one of them alive. Back on the battlefield, Cheonbaek swiftly beheads and takes out a large number of warriors from the Jin family. He then notices someone standing across him from the other side of the battlefield, and that person is Wik-young. He is someone who enrages Cheonbaek, and he will make sure to kill him with his own bare hands. Red Sword Chi begins to gather around the blade of the Cheonbaek sword, but before he is able to finish it up, a familiar face shows up behind him. It was the head elder, and Cheonbaek didn't notice his presence nearing him. Then the head elder launches a piercing attack that nearly hits Cheonbaek, but he dodges it and counterattacks him. The counter, however, lands on an afterimage, and the environment around them becomes a field donning the purest white fog. Cheonbaek recognizes this technique as the Blade of Illusion, and this makes the head elder nostalgic, for he hasn't heard of that name in a long time. The head elder then greets Cheonbaek by his title, the Bloodhound. Cheonbaek never expected the head elder to appear behind him without any presence, even if he was focused on Wik-young. He considers the head elder a martial master with full certainty. Cheonbaek says that it isn't a bad idea to become the strongest in all of Shanxi first, but the head elder says that it might be a bit impossible for him. Cheonbaek rebuts his theory since they will never know until they try. But the head elder counters him by telling him that way of thinking is what the weak always say. He continues by telling him that the weak fail to realize that nothing will change the inevitable outcome. Cheonbaek then praises the head elder for his sharp words as his chi wraps around his sword. Then the head elder wonders if his words are the only thing that is sharp, while he wraps his sword with chi as well. With both their swords embedded with their chi, the blades begin to glow red, as the head elder allows Cheonbaek to make the first move. He gladly takes up the offer and lunges at the head elder. Their blades clashed, and every time Cheonbaek slashed the head elder, it would either miss or hit an afterimage. Then, at one point, the head elder went from evasive to offensive tactics. He sends a flurry of slashes at Cheonbaek and forces him to go to the defense position. The speed of the head elder's attacks was so fast that the Cheonbaek could not get a chance to counter him, and he could barely keep the defenses up. Suddenly, the head elder went even faster and pushed Cheonbaek back into a corner. Their attacks and defenses were so powerful that the warriors of both sides were getting caught in their fight, so they all agreed to get away from them. Then, out of nowhere, an attack that moved like a snake landed a cut on Cheonbaek's forearm. This gives him a disadvantage since the arm that was injured was his dominant hand, so he is forced to use the other one. But before he gets to do anything, the head elder lunges towards the injured warrior and initiates an attack. Cheonbaek raises his blade to defend himself, but the attack is so strong that it manages to twist and break his arm. This gives the head elder the chance to finish the fight. He takes the attack and begins to send a bunch of slices that manage to cut Cheonbaek all over his body. He is so injured from the attack that he begins to spit out and bleed a ton of blood.
That's it for today, guys. Thanks for watching. Please check out these awesome videos and like and subscribe to my channel.